Welcome to Ichiraku Ramen, and thank you for joining me for another journey into the world of Shinobi. Before we begin, I want to give a huge thank you to everyone who listens, supports the channel, and enjoys these stories. Today's story is part 4 of Killing Off the Blue Uchiha. Summary. In this alternate universe, the Blue Uchiha always knew he was just going along for the ride. Disconnected from the world around him, he was content to stay in the shadows, until his scars refused to let him forget the past. Now, operating as an elite ANBU Hunter Ninja, Naruto has become a melting pot of epic proportions. His power is unstable, his trauma is surfacing, and the people he once called friends are watching him change. Concern has warped into deep paranoia. They fear the worst. And in the Shinobi world, when an Uchiha becomes a threat, something deeply regrettable must be done. Will the Blue Uchiha survive his own comrades? This is a fan-made story inspired by the world of Naruto. All characters in the original universe belong to their respective creators. This narration is created for entertainment purposes as part of a transformative storytelling experience. The story itself was written by Foy the Snooze Button, and full credit goes to the original author. If you would like to read the original version, the link to the story is included in the video description below. If you like my content and want to keep up with future updates, hit that subscribe button and don't forget leave a like if you enjoyed the video. It not only helps me but helps with YouTube algorithm. Now sit back, relax and enjoy. Chapter 16. Blood Traitor. An Uchiha term referring to a person that reveals harmful information about a person or the clan to outsiders, either out of spite and hatred for the victim or out of some sort of loyalty to the village/country. Old clans had names for traitors of the blood. Hyuga called them sightless. Aburame called them maggots. In the Uchiha clan case, clan law developed and improved defining what harmful meant and emphasizing why exposing inferior cracks in their superior clan was frowned upon. Crimes such as murder, molestation, or rape were met out with punishments deemed worse than death, prolonging the unbearable suffering of the perpetrator for as long as their life remained. Therefore, it was much more satisfying to report such cases to the clan councils so justice would be reached. Any internal problem imaginable can be solved within the clan without involving outsiders. The Uchiha were a private people, more so than the Hyuga and Aburame, for when the clan of Byakugan holders flaunted their wealth and affluence, branding some of their numbers as branch members, and the bug users were relegated to the edge of society against their will by the village due to their speciality in insects and bugs, the Uchihas only spoke up when their voices needed to be heard. They were a clan of power and dominance, respecting nothing less. In their eyes and since their founding, they saw no reason to bring outside parties to resolve their personal quarrels. Children were raised to not keep their quarrels to themselves but to smooth out their issues in the secrecy of their clan, or at least wherever no outside ears could hear them. The clan was a symbol of unity, and it was a home for their own. There was a reason their clan, known for their aggression and ninja prowess, were still close together after so many years. Exactly the way Indra Otsutsuki, their forefather, wanted his children to be united. This was the first time someone so close to the clan head was accused of being a traitor of the blood. Mikoto's innocence was called into question by her first attempt at fleeing. That time she intended to throw a genjutsu over the others gathered around her during the impromptu game of football. Still, the clan council gave Mikoto the benefit of 2 days before her inevitable trial, so she could collect her thoughts, while anyone in the past that didn't have the benefit of being the significant other to the clan had only had 1 day to structure their defense. She was kept under strict house arrest. Her chakra was sealed to an infinitesimally tiny speck, useless for anything other than having a light jog, and her dijitsu was locked in deactivation. The clan head's wife was given every faculty to ensure she was healthy, watched at all hours of the day and night to prevent her from taking her life. Though that wouldn't happen. Mikoto had too much pride to slit her wrists with her long talons as she soaked in the bath, plunge a kunai into her heart, drink down a bottle of rat poison, or even bite off her tongue. Every morning she was allowed out of the house for a few minutes of fresh air, until she was returned to her hospitable jail, which was a vacant civilian home outside the reach of the clan head's residence, away from the general populace and somewhere for her to be alone with her thoughts. The same went for the accuser, whom in this case is Blue, her brother. The blind Uchiha was placed on the extreme opposite end of the clan compound from the person he was accusing of being a blood traitor, disallowed from contact from anyone other than his handlers, and provided a comfortable, humane living environment until the trial. Like it was previously stated, if Mikoto wasn't the clan head's wife, the trial before the clan council and the audience of clanmates would have happened within a day of the accusation. Out of respect for his clan's traditions and laws, Blue kept to himself within those 2 days, for although he didn't like the idea of Minato growing stronger using the power of his human half-soul, he enjoyed the idea of battling someone who wasn't going to start off taking it easy on him. Not like Jiraiya. Not like Nagato. Had Blue been human or technically alive those times, he might not have won, at least not against the Rinnegan god. If it came to the Toad Sage, he would have outfoxed the man into the grave. This deityhood he existed in was something he intended to understand. Minato could summon as many shadow clones he wanted to train every length and breadth of his newfound limitation from absorbing his half-soul, or try to master the koi fish summoning contract he signed to accomplish that in human feat. All the better. Blue's problem was if the continent got dragged into their fight. Then there was Kagaya Otsutsuki, the goddess of the Otsutsuki clan. However, it was that Minato signed the koi fish contract, the antithesis of the crow contract. There was no feasible way the blonde Kagaya wouldn't be made aware of the deity locked in the moon. The memory of Kagaya's Rinne Sharingan was the last thing his half-soul transmitted to him. It was a projection of the true I, and yet still was able to overcome the half-soul Minato struggled to contain. The Uchiha man wasn't afraid of the heavenly Dujutsu of the goddess, but he wasn't looking forward to facing it. Day by day, it felt like his and the lady's confrontation was unavoidable. The woman's manipulations wanted only them to remain on Earth, highlighted in her saying that bestowing Minato her favor would lead to Blue losing all of his earthly connections. Did she have precognition, like Nagato's outer path allowed him sight of the end of reality? Did she know that Blue would limit his fight with Minato to the Otsutsuki dimension? In preparation for the trial to damn his sister and the battles to come, Blue meditated on the roof of his assigned house, doing so in the way he knew best, tinkering with crystalline, focusing on the trigger mechanism and the Senbon capacity. His hands worked and his mind wandered. When two giants fought, the grass suffered. An old acquaintance once told him that, one time when he and the old acquaintance spectated on a raging battle between Kushina Uzumaki and Kakuzu in a blood-spattered forest battleground. That saying was proven right on countless occasions, recently of which was the Master of Crows against the now-dead Rinnegan god, where Aim's physical and psychological landscape was forever changed. On the scale Blue and Kagaya would meet, the planet would feel every moment. Worry creased the Blue Uchiha's brow. Would there be a planet left afterwards? He didn't know. Day of the trial. Uzumaki residence. The quiet hum of a radio ebbed in the background of clattering coming from upstairs. It was tuned to a station in Iron Country, thrumming a peppy pop song meant to bring up the spirits of the listeners in anticipation for the day. Kushina left the guest room, a smaller mirror of the master bedroom, and zipped up her jounin vest as she stepped down the stairs to the kitchen, throwing over her upper body a black tracksuit with tasteful orange lining. The lady whistled along with the song chirping from her radio, bobbing her head and loading 2 slices of bread into the toaster, spinning around the kitchen and smoothly picking out a jar of peanut butter, a butter knife, a plate and a mug, leaving them on her counter and putting some water into the kettle, setting in on the fire. After that she went to another part of the kitchen, a cabinet above the oven, and stood up on her toes, managing to snag a fresh box of tea, wondering why she kept them somewhere she couldn't easily reach. The shrill whistle of the kettle brought her out of her mind. She ripped open the top of the box of honeyed strawberry tea and took out a single bag, tossing it into the mug and leaving the box of tea in the fridge. She poured the hot water into the mug and deftly caught the toast as it sprang out from the toaster. Not enough for them to fall to the ground if she hadn't caught them, but enough to bring a quiet smile to her lips that her reflexes were as sharp as ever. She spread an obnoxiously thick layer of peanut butter on the toast, pushed them together and chomped on them, If her great-grandmother Mito Uzumaki saw how much of the spread she lathered on her toast, the older woman would scold her for being so wasteful. Kushina couldn't help it though, for toast and peanut butter were her favorite breakfast meals. It gave her energy, plus it tasted amazing. Money wasn't exactly an issue. That stray line of thought slowed down her ravenous devouring of her toast. It wasn't her first time thinking about this. Sometimes it worried her how she wasn't using her money properly, something like how Minato spread his wealth in already popular businesses, or how Yugao told her that Blue invested forward, leaving substantial sums to prospective and ambitious ventures, like the Solar Energy Development Company in Suna or a civilian school in Fire Country that admitted a good number of students on scholarships. Those sort of investments came to mind. The Uzumaki also had a hunch that Blue could be the man from Chill. Sure, she donated a few million every month directly to the displaced people in Fire Country that were finding it hard to get their footing once more, even years after the Third War. And the donations felt much better whenever she visited refugee camps and battered villages, seeing them regain some semblance of normalcy little by little. The man from Chill was another person that regularly gave his money to the displaced and struggling. She didn't know for how much longer she could donate if her billions just sat there in her accounts. She sipped her tea. Then there was her income from being a shinobi. Joun and Sensei were entitled to a weekly wage to compensate for not being able to properly go out for missions for prolonged periods of time, but only as long as their students were showing real progress since leaving the academy. She made up her mind to send letters to her accountants to look into something adventurous, ambitious, trustworthy and earnest to put her money into, at least to multiply her wealth so she could give more money to those that needed it. Kushina ran a hand through her red hair and groaned, already not liking the amount of paperwork she had to do. Tap tap tap. She looked to where the small noise came from, the kitchen window, and her brow knitted as she saw a fairly large crow waiting there. It turned its head to the side, eyeing her with a beady black eye, and crowed. "See a call. Messenger crow," she wondered, cautiously stalking to the window. The bird hopped off and she threw it open, letting it perch on the sill. Certainly pigeons, hawks and sometimes eagles were utilized to send messages, primarily for those that didn't want to use their phones, or didn't know how to use a phone. Crows sending messages was odd. The black birds already had a reputation for being the harbingers of death and the Shinigami's summons, so Kushina was rightly hesitant to let the bird into her home, only allowing it to sit on the windowsill. Wherever you went on the planet, if someone was going to die or had died, it wasn't always pronounced, but if you look around closely, you'll either see a few crows milling about the environment, or a cluster of crow feathers scattered about here and there of the scene. There were also tales of those at death's door that cried, saying they saw crows circling his head, waiting for him to expire so they could swoop down and claim their soul. One would wonder why the Shinigami didn't choose vultures as its summons. Understandably, though, crows didn't have a very good reputation. Kushina, on the other hand, wasn't so superstitious that she discarded her curiosity. If she was, she would be no better than her friends, believing the worst of Blue without taking years of history into account. She wasn't them. The Blue she knew, that sullen yet smiling boy that was so eager to talk with her, a puffy-cheeked Uzumaki girl, about anything and everything, no matter how nonsensical or outlandish, would never in a million years be as terrible as they thought he was now. Blue might have been a genius to the village, an articulate child and basically an overworked child soldier, but he was her friend first. Thankfully, she wasn't the only one that had the presence of mind to recall who the man was to them. Standing there by the window and gearing up her chakra chains beneath her skin, in case of a trap, she raised a patient eyebrow. The bird stuck out its right claw and she noticed a thin strap of paper attached to it, tied there by a piece of purple thread. She untied the string, doing so cautiously in spite of the worrying gaze of the black-eyed bird, and her eyes identified the short string of numbers as the numbers of a mobile phone. The woman narrowed her eyes at the number. The dawn of technology brought about a change in ways people could get attacked and hurt. There were rumors flying about of a cursed phone number. If you called it or it called you and the person spoke, you would be put under a trance by their voice and forced to do their bidding. Now, Kushina didn't know anyone in the village that had fallen to this audio genjutsu through phones, and she wasn't inclined to believe. It was likely to be some sort of scary story parents told their kids to discourage them from calling or answering unknown numbers. If the person that sent her the phone number was so cocky that they thought she would fall for the illusion so quickly, she was inclined to humor them. Genjutsu scarcely worked on her, thanks to her near-infinite well of chakra, her sensory ability, and the fact that the QB chakra fluttering around her chakra network burned away external chakra that somehow made it past both internal security measures. Sharingan illusions were tricky though, but those mainly worked either by direct eye contact or if Kushina was seeing them, and them not seeing her. The time Obito cast the Sharingan Genjutsu on her, posing as the store clerk when she was paying for the skin cream and bubblegum, she went along with his trick and left the village's walls because she was curious who had the blatant audacity to hypnotize her. With a confident scoff and a careless roll of her shoulder, she slipped her phone from her tracksuit pants pocket and flipped it open, taking a quick picture of the crow now casually seated on the windowsill. Just in case. Of what? Who's to say? The crow tilted its head to the side at the self-earned eye roll from the red-haired Uzumaki, showing a remarkable amount of bewilderment for a bird. She dialed the number and pressed call. BRR 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 BRR. Click. Kushina waited with her flip phone by her right ear, half expecting to hear a chakra-heavy voice or a hypnotic sound, daring the person to do their worst. Hi! There was a distinct lack of chakra in the low tone, an unmistakable rumble in that singular word, and a cascade of emotion rolled from the woman's ear into her heart, sending her into the counter and slowly sliding down to the floor, gripping the phone to her ear with both hands. Her lips froze, not like how that small organ in her chest was rankling for freedom, hammering a beat she was all too familiar with. It was amazing how one word could take her down so easily. She swallowed, taking her time to reply. Hey, she whispered hoarsely. She cleared her throat and collected herself. Hey, how's it going? Blue scratched the back of his head. I'm not gonna lie, could be better. What's up? This and that. They're not important right now. I've been waiting for you, you know. I'm sorry, Kushina. I really didn't mean to hold you down. She opened her mouth to tell him it was fine, but his next words stilled her very being. He couldn't help but tell her a problem that refused to leave him. Turns out, I can't get over you. I've tried and I've tried, and I've tried. The crow turned around and its gaze went to the outside of the Uzumaki's mansion. I even hoped that while I'm at the front, during the war, a stray kunai or a wild shuriken would take me out, so I'd stop thinking of you. His instincts didn't permit him such a luxury. His Sharingan and his reflexes could hardly be faulted. Kushina didn't realize she was crying until her silent tears landed on her knees, pulled up to her chest. She heard his shaky smile in his steady voice. Want to hear my lowest point? It wasn't when you got married to that guy or that get-together at your place. Kushina's lips parted and she breathed out a solitary question. Yeah? He smirked humorlessly. I was 13. It was somewhere inside his first few missions without Yugao. He had been assigned to a team consisting of an Aburame, a Hyuga and an Inuzuka, tasked to transport some stolen goods from IWA to Konoha over a massive, deep gorge. As usual, he was the youngest in the team and due to seniority was made to walk behind the horse-drawn cart as it trudged on the wooden bridge, swaying precariously in the light yet got summer breeze. The sounds of distant explosions ruffled the Uchiha boy. Something wasn't right. This was going too smoothly. He asked the Hyuga if he could use his Byakugan to scan the bridge for traps. The Inuzuka roared at him to return to his place at the back, flagging for them to cross. He didn't smell anything amiss. The bomb was made without seals or chakra clay, and the explosion went off underneath the cart. His Sharingan saw it too late. The Hyuga broke his fall by the time his back hit the bottom of the gorge, though he still shattered. Orochimaru appeared at his side minutes later, part of the team sent to investigate Blue's stammering SOS, and she bellowed for medics as soon as she caught sight of him, helpless to save her son with her tainted chakra. Bleeding. Mangled. Broken. They rushed him back to the village, and he was confined to his hospital bed for months, until he forced his way out of the hospital against his doctor's orders and went back to the front. Within that time, Kushina, 17 at the time, came back to Konoha on hearing what happened and stayed by his bed all the while. The only thing you talked about was that guy and how great he was or how cool he was or how handsome he was, Blue said, unable to hide the bitterness of the memory. She knew he still liked her then, as he constantly reminded her of that fact till that particular point in time, where he began drifting away the moment he left Konoha, not even close to fully healed but ready to reset his emotions. The Sandaime was all for Blue's early discharge because Blue was a vital shinobi in Hiruzen's ranks. Maybe she just forgot he was crushing on her. Or maybe she hoped he moved on. So he did. He moved on however best he could. Sometime after getting back to the flow of things and traversing the continent from warfront to warfront, he befriended Yujito, at least hoping her companionship would help him forget about Kushina. He didn't hope for anything more. It was why he didn't make any moves to sleep with her. Yujito liking him wasn't his intention. Naga, the holder of Nubari, came closer as well, Mei Terumi too, Shizen Kato, Enko Mitarashi, and so on. There were a long list of friends, close friends, sex friends, casual hookups, and memorable acquaintances. Any sexual exploit of his stayed straight, but that didn't mean he limited his network of friendships to women. Losing Iraka Yumino was the reason he acquired his Mangekyo Sharingan in the first place. Then you started coming around, telling me that you missed me when I was pretty sure you were happier with that guy. You tore apart my resolve to leave you the hell alone. He paused and coughed into his fist. Still there? Yeah, I'm still here. Well, I'm sorry for pouring all of that on you so suddenly. In case he didn't get the chance again. If Kaguya left the moon and she was truly his antithesis, then he needed to unburden himself, even for just a moment. It must have been hard, she said, pursing her lips and unintentionally tasting her salty tears. Bottling all that up for so many years, watching me go around not knowing what I wanted. I was making do. Blue. She exhaled, switching to her other ear and wiping her eyes in the crook of her arm. Can I see you? We can talk better. I can't do this over the phone. The other line buzzed a little, where she could hear the faint creak of a door opening and the low hum of a brief conversation. The door closed, and he said, I'll text you when. Now's not really the time. I'm sorry. Nah. She wiped her eyes of tears once more, gesturing as nonchalantly as she could with her shuddering emotions. I needed to hear your side of this. I was hoping the first time we talked after so long would go better than this. It all came spilling out, and not even his strongest emotional cap could dam the waterfall. His complicated feelings for her ever since she told him her intentions that night of the get-together had been troubling him a lot more than he felt it should. Again, I'm really sorry, Kushina dash. It's fine. She smiled with a laugh at his awkward apologies. It just means you're letting me back in, and that makes me really happy. She got up and looked down at her cold cup of tea. Her purple eyes showed the weight of her sadness. We can sort this out later, Blue. Of course, yeah? He stopped at the knock on the door, breathing out to get into the right mindset ahead of damning his sister. I've got to go. Yeah, me too. She had a genin team meeting soon. She then sternly warned, her playful tone not lost on him. Don't avoid me, Naruto. Her calling him by his name spoke volumes for the casual seriousness of her threat. Ya hear me, young man? He laughed. I hear ya, ma'am. I promise I won't. The person knocked on his door again and he groaned. Talk to you later, Kushina. Later, Blue. Click. Hearing the delayed beep that their call was over and the reassuring notification of the phone bill for that call, she mutely slumped forward into the counter, deflating like a balloon. Fuck my life. Her phone buzzed and she stood up, hopeful that Blue was suddenly not so busy for them to meet. It wasn't the Blue Uchiha. The caller ID read Miko. The redhead scoffed, sagging into the counter again. Definitely not the time, Mikoto. Click. Ignore. Fugaka stared without looking at his desk, gripping his armrest tightly and clenching his teeth hard enough for it to sound, making a grating noise in the desolate silence of his office. He let the declaration sink in. one of the two Uchiha elders that represented the clan council, remained stoic despite the festering killer intent warbling over the clan head's ominous form. Clan law detailed what to do if the clan head's immediate family was accused of being a blood traitor or is accusing someone else of that heinous crime. Elder Milliam, a graying woman of average build, wearing a glass left eye and a monocle over her right as well as a vibrant, strictly maintained red and yellow formal kimono, wool socks and wooden sandals, pushed her hands into her sleeves and looked down at her clan head from over her nose, saying, "As the life partner of Lady Mikoto, we cannot in good conscience trust you to be impartial during the trial. Under the authority Lord Indra bestowed the clan council through clan law, we all agreed that you can sit with the council on the dais, but your input is to be non-existent." Elder Roth, a pasty old man with a receding hairline and thick eyebrows, wearing a baggy and loose yukata, as if coming straight from the bathhouse, tapped his wooden cane on the floor and placed his other hand at his lower back, grunting in a voice so deep it made Fugaku recall all the hellish training he underwent in this man's dreaded dojo. "For the sake of maintaining the trust of our people in the dispensation of justice and a fair trial, we politely ask for you to think first of the clan and what would happen if one in your position destroys our history of reliability." The clan head had ultimate power, much like the Hokage. Fugaku had every right to override the council's decision for him to sit in the sidelines in his wife's judgment, and doing so would only raise a feeble uproar from the council. He also had the right to lead the trial however he wanted, for even if clan law dictated how a blood traitor trial should be performed, it all depended on the clan head's willingness and the council's drive for answers. After all, clan law were merely ancient books of regularly amended rules and regulations governing the Uchiha way of life. They held no real power other than the fact Indra Uchiha, formerly Otsutsuki, spoke for them to be written. Elder Roth grunted, snapping Fugaku back to the room. "Will you do what is best for your people?" The point of the trial was to question both parties and determine whether or not Mikoto truly revealed harmful information about Blue to the Hokage, an outsider. Judgment would come after both parties had their fill of speaking, albeit within a certain time frame. Fugaku rubbed the sides of his temple, closing his eyes in deep thought. He didn't always get along with Mikoto, and they were almost always at each other's throats, but that didn't mean he didn't love her. Sure, they could have done better with Itachi, and Sasuke seemed to be gravitating towards his older brother in such a way one wouldn't be mistaken in thinking Itachi was Sasuke's unofficial guardian. Yes, they more or less left the boys to their devices in hopes it would toughen them up against the problems of the world, and this invariably brought about a jagged disconnect in their family, a foul impassiveness of his and Mikoto's doing, but there was a reason he married Mikoto instead of the woman his father presented to him. She represented the Uchiha strength in his eyes. Uchiha strength. Fugaku loved his clan. He loved the Uchiha way. The confidence of his people gave the clan head power. He could be the strongest in the clan and they would follow along dutifully, but an Uchiha heart was fertile ground for resentment. The fruits were terrible to behold. "I will lead this trial." He held up his hand to quieten their objections. "That is final." Mikoto stepped up into the dock as the accused, not visibly restrained but unable to reach any usable chakra. Her dull black eyes turned to the man that walked into the dock on the other side of the judgment panel, some few feet from her and yet too far out of reach. His milky white eyes glinted with a solemn smile, facing her with his dark, circular shades with a distracted gaze. "Where are my sons, Naruto?" Mikoto asked strongly, fighting the futile urge to lunge at her brother. "Itachi, Sasuke, where are my boys?" Naruto screwed his lips to the side in noticeable distaste. "When have you ever worried about them, sis?" "Now, Naruto," she whispered tiredly. "I'm worried about them now." The room gradually filled up, occupied by adult members of the clan that were interested watching, which was basically anyone from Chunin rank to Jounin or civilians from the age of 16 upwards. Anyone and everyone wanted to see how everything would unfold. Outside of the council chambers, hordes of men and women brimmed to look through the windows. The ceiling fans worked hard to maintain air circulation. The clan council proceeded up to the judgment panel and took their places. A frantic murmuring erupted as the clan head sat at the center of the panel, flicking his gaze between his wife and his brother-in-law. Mikoto's spirits lifted. Blue smirked, an expression so secretive anyone that saw the fractional lift of a corner of his lips would see mild interest instead of worry. The trial began. Blue formally accused Mikoto of revealing the fact he was having therapy sessions with Inoichi Yamanaka to combat the after-effects of the Third War, which invariably led to him being branded as an Class A threat and having him under surveillance. This was harmful, because the knowledge he confided in his sister, in which she told to outsiders, resulted in a large number of the village questioning his allegiance to the village, proven in spades when a good majority of the village celebrated when the Hokage supposedly killed him. When a person lived and bled for his village, providing vital inventions to society and ensured he stayed within the law, it was damaging when all their sacrifice were disbelieved, especially when the scars of that sacrifice was being treated in private. Mikoto's defense was that it was for the sake of protecting her family, as she didn't think someone that was mentally unstable should be anywhere near children. Then Elder Milliam, who lived on Blue Street some yards from Blue's then home, asked why she left her son with said mentally unstable man while she and Fugaku went on their wedding anniversary, taking Sasuke along with them when they had more than a few friends that could suffice as sitters. Daily, the elder would greet the man and his nephew as he went and dropped the boy in school, picking him up later in the day. Sometimes Blue and Itachi would come over for tea, where the man's nephew had freedom to adventure around her house as she and Naruto spoke about her family, who were currently setting roots in Waterfall Country. It was common for the woman to leave one or both of her sons with her brother. Matter of fact, Shursui and Izumi's parents too trusted the man to look after their kids for a little while, as they were busy and Blue was on a long break from his shinobi duties. Elder Milliam didn't want to be biased, but she was a good judge of character. Blue didn't look or act in any way dangerous to himself, their clan, or their village. She asked the clan head's wife how she was so sure Blue would turn his weapons, namely Crystalline and the twins, against them all. Mikoto didn't want to reply. So Blue made a special request for both of them to be hypnotized. He honestly wanted to know why she exposed his therapy sessions. Deep down, he knew why. Mikoto had always hated him. When her childhood battering didn't work to quench his drive and he rose through the ninja ranks anyway, she wanted to see him ruined. Blue lowered his defenses as the audio genjutsu was administered on him and his sister. The questions came. The truth flooded out. Naruto was right. A smile played on Blue's lips as Fugaku presented him with Mikoto's eyes, before an assembly of clan elders and other clanmates outside of the trial room. The Blue Uchiha couldn't see, but he could sense the burning ire corroding the clan head's gut with hatred. Not too long later, Fugaku's guards would find his dead body in his office, seated upright against the front of the desk and with his throat slit clean through from one side of his jaw to the other, gripping a brief, blood-reddened suicide letter in his right hand and the kunai he cut himself with in his left. Ethereal crows lingered around the clan head, who glared at his wife's brother as he collected the small chest containing the pair of eyes. It meant that Fugaku was resolved to kill himself. A quiet smirk turned Naruto's lips up, collecting the chest with both hands. "Thanks," he said, too chipper for the occasion. Fugaku left. Then Mikoto was brought out of the building in the clan, standing in such a way that there was a clear path from the building to the eastern exit of the clan compound, spat on the floor with morbid disdain, and turned their backs, encouraging their younger ones to do the same. Blue specially asked for there not to be a stoning or rotten fruit throwing or even for her to be stripped naked. Instead he requested her eyes and some other things. Mikoto's hair was roughly shaven bald, bumpy for lack of care and having a few patches somewhat longer than the other though still mostly bald. Her eyebrows were shaved off too, as well as she was forced into a brown sackcloth with heavy chains draped over her chakraless body. The brand of a blood traitor was etched to her forehead with a sharp eagle feather. The dark hollow holes of her eyes turned to her brother, intuitively knowing he was there. "Are you satisfied with this, little brother?" Blue smiled. "Like you can't even imagine, sis." The absolute silence of the compound made their private words boom all the more louder, as if they were the only ones in the whole village. She knew they were there though. In Mikoto's blindness and her inability to contact her chakra, she could hear their bubbling disapproval for the revelations of her character. Hating her brother because he was different. The woman frowned, her lips quivering to stem her rising cry, doing her best to keep her chin strong. Blue sealed up her eyes to the palm of his right red glove and placed his hands on her shoulders. "Not gonna kill yourself, sis?" he whispered in her ear, curious as to why he didn't see death flags flapping around his sister like with her husband. "Not gonna bite your tongue and bleed to death? Save yourself the humiliation." "No, little brother," she uttered in reply, gritting her teeth as the geyser threatened to erupt and her will trembled. "I'm not going to die." "You think so, huh?" The underworld chuckled, patting her shoulders. "If only Dad were here to see us now." That broke her. Her body racked with agony, unable to physically cry, weeping for her lost dignity. Blue grinned. Crows hovered over his sister. The quiet of the clan compound stamped in that she was alone, shuffling down the path to the forest outside the village, being led by a chunin holding one of her many crippling chains. Little by little, the people left for their homes, even the chunin, letting her wander her way out of the compound by herself, stumbling and falling in the darkness of her absent eyes. Mikoto was alone. The Blue Uchiha stared at his reflection. His gaze was fixed on his eyes. Mikoto's dark iris turned within itself and slowly rippled blue from the center outwards, glowing with the cerulean look Naruto was known for. His eyes spun, shifting and parting into 3 tomo. He pushed further. His Dijutsu evolved accordingly. The 3 tomo mixed together, and the whites of his eyes turned black. His iris glittered like assembled stained glass, blue, white and black, and shaped into a 3-point shuriken with a white dot in the middle. Then his eyes shattered. The mirror rattled. The air hummed. The bathroom tiles clattered and the lights flickered. He gave one last push. A twisted smirk slithered up his face. Ah! The broken pieces of his Mangekyo Sharingan gathered back together, creeping over the darkened backdrop of what used to be the whites of his eyes and settling inside his white irises, reforming the 3-point shuriken, though this one was entirely dark blue. Another triangular shuriken, one with a far lighter shade of blue, settled over the first, doing so upside down. A black dot centered itself in his iris and both triangles began to whirl, the first turning clockwise and the other spiraled anti-clockwise. The mirror cracked, inanimate and yet unable to properly reflect the eyes of the Master of Crows. Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. All of the Sharingan jutsus that impaired his vision laid out before him. Inferno. Projection. Reflection. Not only those, though. Tsukuyomi and Amaterasu presented themselves in his right eye, Kamui in his left, and Susanoo in both. The clarity of his vision astounded him. He could see the lingering chakra of the air, the intricate details of his face, and, even as in reality he looked nothing less than human, he saw himself how his crows saw him. How the dead or the dying saw him. Darkness bathed his visage, spotted evenly by 6 eyes bearing the horror-inducing orbs of Blue's eternal Dijutsu, a toothy grin stretching from one corner of his face to the other, holding a mouth full of jagged, serrated teeth. His hair was entirely blonde, standing as it naturally did. Last was the thing floating right above Blue's head. A spiked crown of hellfire, adorned with the ghastly, howling faces of damned and demented souls deemed special enough to suffer for all eternity inside that inescapable prison. He blinked, and all 6 eyes turned to look at the door through the splintered reflection of the mirror, a whole 10 seconds before a timid knock sounded. "Ankle Blue?" Naruto's eyes returned to its sky-blue base form on hearing Sasuke's voice. The man opened the door and bent down to the child's height, giving the boy a bright smile. The 4-year-old hugged his teddy bear close. "What's wrong, Sasuke?" Blue asked, checking the boy for anything wrong with a sharp sweep of his 3-tomo Sharingan, too fast for the boy to notice. "Itachi's still sleeping?" The younger Uchiha bobbed his head, saddened by that fact. Itachi was Sasuke's idol. The young boy scarcely ever played with anyone else, following his big brother around like a lost but overactive puppy. "Ya hungry?" This time the boy nodded eagerly, making the Blue Uchiha chuckle and give Sasuke a light-hearted hair tousle. "I'll get Shisui to make you some pancakes." "Choco chip!" Sasuke exclaimed, suddenly more happy and throwing his hands in the air. "Choco chip!" Blue returned with just the same amount of excitement, picking his youngest nephew up and carrying him to the living room, where Izumi and Shisui were watching cartoons, chanting all the while. Itachi was dozing off in Shisui's room, under the watchful eye of his shadow clone. Any attempt from the clone to sneak off would result in his older nephew waking up. Shisui's father was in the shed at the backyard, scratching his head and looking over a broken lawnmower, and the speedster's mother was running a few errands in the village. "Shisui," Blue called, diverting both Genin's attention from the colorful morning cartoon playing on TV. "I need you to make Sasuke pancakes." Izumi perked up. "Oh, me too." "Ah, but uncle." Sasuke curled into Blue, hiding from Shisui's glare. "I'm busy. You can watch cartoons any other time. I need you to help me out, kid." He put Sasuke down and nudged him to the living room. "There's somewhere I need to go and it's kinda important. Can't you tell Izumi to do it? She doesn't even like cartoons." Blue placed his fists on his waist, arms akimbo. "Yeah, I can do that, but right now I'm telling you to do it." He jerked his head to the kitchen, leaving no room for arguments. "Go." Shisui grumbled his way into the kitchen, noisily banging pots and pans in a huffing fit to get his point across that he didn't want to make pancakes for Sasuke. "Chocolate chip!" Blue shouted, and the speedster gave out a drawn-out groan. Blue masterfully ignored Shisui's hissy fit. He had been babysitting the 3 Uchiha kids since they were babies, Sasuke too for that matter. But it wasn't changing their diapers or watching TV with them till they fell asleep that made them his godkids. It was when he reprimanded them for once painting his wall with their poo, tackled Izumi away from strangers she more than thrice waddled up to on her toddler legs, caught Sasuke before he fell down from a swing, showed Shisui that having thick eyelashes were something to be proud of, and retrieved Itachi from outside the village after the first time he ran away from his parents, leaving his door open for the boy whenever he needed an escape from Fugaku and Mikoto. They all had parents, but Blue was a special guardian to them, and them to him too. He was well adept at handling them on his own. Izumi changed the channel to a popular Sune rom-com. Sasuke busied himself with his teddy bear. "I'll be heading out for a bit." The girl grunted, far too engrossed in what was happening on TV. Sasuke waved. A vortex of air turned blue into his left eye. He expected this reception. It was the home dimension of the Otsutsuki clan after all. His Kamui dropped him off on a broken pillar and be perched there, boring his gaze down on a battered temple that had its roof torn off long ago. The marble walls chipped with age and errant foliage coiled around the ruins, adding the greenish color of nature, and the white tone of vine flowers adding an eerie tranquility to the small gathering held below. In unison, the pale-skinned Otsutsuki turned their heads up to him, their Byakugan gleaming under the sunless, moonless sky. Blue's expression hardened. His bright blue orbs, presently not activated as his Dijitsu, beamed down at them from his high perch. His face was darkened to his nose, casting down ominous gloom from his black blonde hair. He quietly pulled up his red gloves, mindful that he wasn't with his cloak, squatting down and placing his forearms on his knees, observing them as they observed him. One of them, a large man with a single curved horn protruding from his head covering materialized red axes to his hands, chained together by their ends and squeezing them hard enough to elicit a crunch. "Kinshiki," another murmured, seated on a lower pillar with a veil over his head. Blue's sharp eyes caught the soft features of his vaguely visible face, and the twitching frown struggling not to flicker down his lip. He crossed his right leg over his left. "Don't." There was an Otsutsuki with a fishing rod laid out on his lap. He tilted his head to the side before he scoffed. "Why not?" Blue's hollow eyes pulsed. "You want to find out?" The one with the fishing rod grit his teeth, making to stand up. Naruto's looked narrowed, festering in his impatience. "Think properly before you get up." The pillar beneath him creaked under the weight of his infernal chakra. "I don't need these eyes to sit you back down, kid." There were quite a few things Blue could do without his eyes. Mikoto's Mangekyo Sharingan was really only needed to get to the Otsutsuki dimension. Any other perk was gladly welcomed. A pasty woman in a pink jumpsuit, standing closest to the Otsutsuki rearing to fight Blue, gripped his shoulder and forced him down. Blue's killer intent distorted the air about him, contained just an inch over his skin. Still they felt it. They all did. "Where is Minato?" The mute Otsutsuki in the pink jumpsuit jabbed her thumb over her shoulder, pointing into the distance to a clearing of scorched grass several yards from the fallen temple. The one called Kinshiki dispelled his weapons and crossed his arms, while the one wearing the veil spoke up on their behalf. "We will not interfere, Uchiha." There was a condescending lilt of his voice and a bored shift in his gaze. "We are not obligated to fight for the one that signed the koi fish summoning." Blue waited for the "but." The long-range specialist raised an eyebrow. "If our goddess calls for us, we will answer." He motioned to the four of them gathered there, and still somehow hinting that there were more. Here and there. Everywhere. Jutting their heads from their semi-visible positions, increasing the gathered Otsutsuki from 4 to a couple dozen powerful individuals. All of us. Could the underworld take the full might of the Astral Clan? Naruto's answer was easy, short, and simple. "Fine by me." Blue leaped off the pillar, and his body flickered into non-existence. The man materialized some miles away from the crumbled temple on a slab of unnatural concrete, spanning far and wide, flat and solid beneath his feet. It had a name, but Blue couldn't be bothered to find out. Minato faced him, about 20 paces away, and Naruto frowned at the man's stolen expression. The white scales under his arms that reached his chin. The feathery blackness of his hair, contrasting the yellow that Blue would have had if he allowed himself to feel the rawness of his anger. The gnarly row of daggers lined in the yandame's mouth, clicking wide into a jovial beam and a winning shine. Minato's white with red flamed Haori was shredded at his feet, now wearing a formerly long-sleeved light blue shirt that was torn off at the elbows, exposing the glittering white scales of his arms. His ninja pants were more or less intact and his shinobi sandals looked fairly okay, except for the almost worn-down soles. Blue closed his eyes and sighed. "You kept all of this power bottled up. Why were you so committed to long-distance attacks?" Minato spoke aloud, rolling his right shoulder and chittering with obvious excitement. It felt less personal. His long-range kills, be it with crystalline, the twins or traps, exceeded his close-quarter kills by a couple hundred. It's easier to shoot down a master samurai in the comfort of his home, having dinner with his family miles away from my position, than to cut open the throat of a Jounin commander in close combat. Both scenarios happened during and after the war. The blood on Naruto's hands could flood a country. His memory was impeccable, but the faces of all the people he killed were a blur somewhere in the corner of his mind. That didn't mean they didn't haunt his dreams. Those shortish moments Blue was in hell. When Minato just killed him, his punishment was to kneel in a field of white roses, blind, deaf and mute though surrounded by the thousands he murdered during active duty, fully aware of their judgmental presence. Blue pursed his lips, then asked, "How do you see this ending?" Naruto was genuinely curious. He was certain that the merge of souls clued the yellow flash of what he presently was, even only a little. Technically, Naruto couldn't be killed, and the Fuin ninjutsu required to seal him needed the same combination that sealed Kaguya into the moon. And that was for the unlikely chance someone below his power level faced him. The only other deity in their world, the one trapped in the moon, was seldom the only person that could bring him close to a state that mirrored death, and vice versa. The Uchiha doubted Minato saw how this was going to end. Instead, Blue saw how it was going to end for Minato. He didn't have precognition, but he saw it. And he told the blonde Fuinjutsu prodigy, "I know how this ends." Minato chuckled. "No spoilers, okay?" Naruto's blue eyes flicked down to his feet, humming at the Hiraishin seal plastered close to his feet. "All right, man, no spoilers." Minato went up in flames, blinding tongues of whitish yellow fire that poured from his very being, and he disappeared in a yellow flash. A tri-pronged kunai plunged into Naruto's chest, connected to an outstretched arm and a burning yellow flash, puncturing his heart and hilting there. The Blue Uchiha's evolved Digitsu stormed, permitting himself to bleed and fall. About to celebrate the end of the fight, Minato clenched his dagger teeth when two more Narutos simply appeared at his sides, pushing their gloved hands into their pockets and cocking their heads to the side. They spoke in unison, in tune to the triangles spiraling in their eyes. Projection, Hydra effect. Minato's enhanced senses couldn't differentiate them, and they didn't behave like clones either, for the one he stabbed simply dissolved into the wind. The Hokage grunted and flashed through a sharp sequence of seals. Wind release, extending wind spears. He pushed his hands out to the side and translucent gales of blistering wind warped around his fingers, shooting straight into the skulls of the intrigued blues. Crunch! Like before, more took their place, making 4. Wind release, undetectable guillotine. Wind lopped off their heads and they multiplied more, projecting into 8 Blue Uchiha, watching the man in collective curiosity. Minato repeated the jutsu, irritated. 8 turned into 16. Again. 16 to 32. Again. 32 to 64. Again. 64 to 128. The white-hot fire relentlessly burned around Minato, standing in the center of the identical crowd of blue-eyed Uchiha, breathing through his teeth for the chakra he used up and steadily reaching the point he couldn't contain the rancorous beast rumbling its way out of his chest. The blue projections tilted their heads to the other side, speaking. What now, Minato? Just another Uchiha trick. The blonde snarled, wiping his lips and flexing his hands for the number of times he ineffectually released those decapitating waves of wind. He smirked, turning in a full circle and addressing the unmistakable projections with a good-natured laugh. You're only delaying the inevitable. Inevitable. The projections echoed, their brows creased. I was looking forward to this. Confronting the man that lusted after his inventions, turned his friends against him, killed him, claimed half of his soul and threatened his closest comrades when Minato realized he wasn't dead. He should have been glad to watch the futility of Minato's attacks. It was sad. Really sad. Before, Blue was eager to test his mettle against an amplified Minato Namikaze. 5 minutes ago, Blue was itching to wring Minato's head from his shoulders, hog-tie him over a spit and slowly cook him over hellfire. Suffer forever. Naruto still intended to do so, make no mistake, he thought, as white fire blanketed the projections, pouring sparkling sulfur on a large portion of the concrete landscape. Fire that burned as hot as all 9 tails of the Kyuubi turned them to ash. 128 to 256. This wasn't even Minato's strength. Little Minato accomplished was truly his own. The Hiraishin was the Nidame's, the Rasengan was theorized by the Sandame, the Toad summoning was gotten from the late Toad Sage. His wealth was mostly unearned and his level 10 mastery of Fuinjutsu didn't include him fashioning something unique to him. The intellect Minato envied so badly and vied so hard to steal from Blue was a chest of secrets he couldn't break open, not able to do so after claiming half of Blue's soul or ransacking his home. Minato was a prodigy in Fuinjutsu, that was without a doubt, though he wasn't using that highly esteemed fact properly. At least, the Hokage's taijutsu was S rank. He couldn't see his flaws, and apparently his large swath of friends couldn't either, so Minato couldn't work on accepting his faults. Blue didn't claim perfection and he wasn't entirely innocent either. No one would be mistaken in calling him a psychopath, given how he could snap back from murdering an entire building to playfully ribbing his nephew, or that the multitude of people he had killed were mostly forgotten. He could have gotten his lack of care from his mother. Who knows? Minato didn't have anything unique going for him, and he took from those that already did all the thinking. This was sad. The projection's worries slid more along the lines of the goddess of the moon. The one that gave you the koi fish summoning. The hundreds of projections droned at once, in perfect sync. Where is he? Bored of me already? The yellow flash chuckled, eyeing the projections carefully and thinking of what next to do. Don't worry, Naruto, this won't take long. They raised their eyebrows, bathed in the ghoulish flames that they once let incinerate them. Do you have a plan? Their eyes drifted upwards. You can't call for the Shinigami. I demoted him. as payback for helping Minato kill him, well aware that death couldn't disobey the one that summoned it. Minato's jaw hardened and the projections, identical right down to their very brain waves and nerve endings, saw the gears turn on the blonde's face. Let's say it's a one-on-one. They all fizzled into oblivion, collectively leaving a single Blue, who pulled his left hand from his pocket and flippantly rolled his wrist. And I don't exceed this form. The thrumming triangles in his eyes devolved to 3 tomo. How about now, Minato? Blue wanted Minato to surprise him. Or rather, he hoped so. Minato's taijutsu prowess surpassed Blue's, logically because one was a long-range specialist and the other was a shorter-range master, making it a good possibility that Minato had some hand-to-hand surprises up his sleeve. He was looking down on the blonde to see if that would get the man to come at him with 100%, skip past all the toying around and get down to a serious fist fight. Blue needed to finish this quick though, since he didn't know where the person who gave Minato the contract was, and that in on itself was worrying. For now, he would humor Minato. At least until the inevitable happened. A sly smirk slipped up Blue's expression at the elation that lit up in Minato's once uncertain cerulean eyes. The sniper snapped his right arm back and unsealed a 4-point windmill shuriken, rearing back completely, so much so that his left knee came up and terrible veins bulged on his neck and right arm, taking aim at the fiery blonde before he swung forward, sending the violently whistling ninja star to the yondaime. A whisper faster, and the ninja star would be splitting air molecules. In that microsecond, as the massive star hummed venomously to part his head from his body, Minato contemplated whether or not to take it, see how far his newfound tough skin would take him. But on seeing how the lethal edges of the weapon heat up, smoking with red-orange light, he bent beneath the star as it reached his nose and pushed a tri-pronged kunai into the hand-grip hole, digging his feet into the earth and powering every fiber of muscle in his being with chakra. The rattling and sparking of both metals rang across the dimension, as well as the physical energy exerted to contain it. Minato assumed there would be exploding tags on the larger-than-life ninja. It was by the time a set of knuckles met his jaw from the left side that he realized the shuriken was a diversion. Doom! He flipped with the blow, and as he was upside down in the air, the blonde Kage released the weapon he wrongfully caught, sending it back to its owner with an extra push with his killer intent. Blue's legs thudded and his arms came up, as if to catch the star, but then he wiggled his fingers and turned on his heel, gripping the near-unseen ninja wire lace through the massive star and whirling around in a full circle, whipping it back to Minato. The hot cutting edge nicked the yondaime's shoulder, then he vanished in a blip of yellow light. Blue blinked to the right and blocked a wild roundhouse kick with a forearm, slipped aside from a jab to his chin, grunted as Minato's hands gripped his shoulders and gathered both his forearms to shield his abdomen from a knee strike, gritting his teeth with each thundering crack into his guard. On the 5th, he pushed the blonde's knee down and opened his arms, freeing himself from the shoulder grapple and planted a rattling straight kick forward, narrowing his whirling jutsu when Minato blocked with his shin, reeling his foot back and ducking a straight punch, rising up with a base palm strike aimed at the Namake's chin. Minato leaned away, clenching his teeth under the effort to overtake the Uchiha's speed. Naruto didn't add heat from himself, more so he could prolong the fight. Minato hastily returned with a sweeping low kick, scorching the concrete and connecting with Blue's ankle. The Uchiha didn't show any discomfort, rather he blasted 7 gut punches, all meeting their mark with bone-shattering quickness, and taking the victim a few inches off the ground. The Blue Uchiha then got hold of Minato's shoulders and brought his head down to his knee. The impact was so hard, thunder exploded on the other side of the dimension. The Minato clone dispelled and Naruto turned around, using his right hand to smack down a right hook and a left elbow to tear Minato's jaw from his head, dispelling that clone. More clones fell down on him. Those blue Sharingan flicked left and right, rolling around his head and tracking all the clones, while the sniper dropped into the fighting stance he copied from the blonde Namake's Toad fighting style. The fight was a blaze of wind and fire. Constant motion. Unwasted movement. His ripped a haymaker across the face of a clone, used the momentum of that strike to crack an elbow into the side of another blonde clone, winced away from an uppercut, and drove the base of his palm into a clone's knee, stepped on its chest and backflipped over a flurry of summoned wind that shred any clone in its vicinity. Blue landed with a crouch and blasted forward, ripping to the staggered horde. Reaching them, his left fist shot forward and his legs snapped apart, dispelling three at once with that attack and driving a kunai down on another as it made to surface from the ground, flicking his wrist and throwing that kunai to deflect a Hiroshin kunai from his position. Yet still a foot found the side of his head. Crack! He tumbled and rolled on his side, away from stomps aimed at his torso. Naruto pushed off the ground and spat out a glob of blood, dazed from the heaven-splitting punt intended to rip his skull from his neck. He leaned his shoulder from the path of a Rasengan, catching the wrist and turned it into Minato's gut. The Fuinjutsu prodigy switched with a clone in the nick of time, swinging 3 Hiroshin kunai at the underworld, releasing them a quarter of a second after the other. Blue knocked each out of their path with 3 well-aimed shuriken, meshed his fingers together and flashed through 30 seals, backtracking all the while from Minato's dogged chase. His fingers ended on Ox. Forbidden Art, Water Release, Sanzu River. Naruto's cheeks filled up and the blonde Kage rightfully ducked away as the Uchiha exhaled unholy wrath from his mouth, barreling at him in the form of red-tinted raging rapids. The blistering water of the underworld carved up the concrete, following Minato as he ran lengthwise around the battlefield, blinking to other seal tags but never able to rest for long before the red water tracked him again. Water that burned hotter than lava spewed from Blue's maw, melting the ground and heating up the air, evaporating 3 seconds later but leaving its mark wherever it glanced. Blue clicked his teeth shut and his cerulean Sharingan pulsed, hardening his jaw against a right hook, grunting from a strike to his stomach and breathed out, hard, from a palm strike at his chest. He swiped a left jab away, leaned to the side from a 4-finger jab to the center of his chest, rocked an elbow into Minato's forearms, stepped back from a knee strike, returned with 3 blows to the Yandame's face, which were aptly blocked and pushed back, giving Minato allowance for 5 hand signs. A complex seal lit up beneath Blue. Earth Release, Excessive Demon Binding Chains. Dark chains broke out of the ground and wrapped around Blue, though the Uchiha just finished his own set of hand signs as the chains locked over his body. Lightning Release, Solar Flare. Lightning rolled over Naruto's body and Minato squinted his eyes, shortly wondering if that jutsu could negate ninjutsu supported with Fuinjutsu. His answer was a burning Spartan kick burying itself in his gut. Boom! Minato ragdolled helplessly till he found his senses once more, digging his hands into the concrete ground to stop himself. A foot stepped on his face, tossing him back again. Crunch! Blue grunted and snapped his arms apart, briskly shattering the iron chains and clapping his hands together, erecting 10 earth walls to slow Minato down. Minato reached the 8th wall before he was forcefully ground to a stop, slumping down a little on the 9th before he staggered to his feet. He wiped the blood leaking from his mouth, staining his lips and chin red in the process. The white flames regained their heat and coiled around him, following suit as he disappeared in a yellow flash. Blue tittered and he grinned. I'm not gonna kill you, Minato. He moved his head to the left, slapping away a punch with the back of his hand, stepping on Minato's right foot before the blonde's knee could shoot up and bouncing an uppercut into the Yandame's chin. Minato fell down on his back and sat up, rubbing his sore jaw and eyeing the underworld with one eye open. Blue was bouncing on his heels, holding a fist close to his chin and beckoning Minato to get up with his other hand. Flash! Naruto guarded his stomach with his shin, slammed the side of his hand into Minato's throat, and broke the blonde spirit with a knee to his gut, crumbling him to his own knees, wheezing and choking. His hands held his caved-in throat. The white flames dimmed. Nah, I'm not gonna kill you. Well, technically you'll be dead but alive, you know. The underworld chuckled, egging the speedster to get back up. In fact, you'll live forever. Hifo winced. Kinda. Flash. Minato swung a tri-pronged kunai for Blue's solar plexus, stubbornly following the Uchiha with more blade swipes until Blue stepped to the side and cracked a base palm strike into his wrist, making Minato let go of the knife. The Master of Crows slipped around a wild punch and dug his knuckles into the weakened Namake's side, dodging another overhead punch and returning a liver jab. The yondaime doubled over, feeling tears prickled at the corner of his eye at the deep soreness of the last attack. "Do you know what I'll do with you, Minato?" "Shut up!" Blue hopped on his feet, prepared for the Rasengan tunneling for his knees, simply sidestepping the unstable ball of blue chakra. The ball spiraled into the ground, fracturing the concrete, and Naruto's punting kick ran into the Namake's head. Minato's brain knocked against his skull. A harsh ringing echoed in his ears, accompanied by the rushing tumble of blood escaping a burst eardrum. "Can you hear me?" Blue laughed, stepping around the downed Kage, the corners of his eyes turned up in a smile as he spoke into Minato's other ear. "How about now?" Minato saw red and his hand surge for Blue's neck, only for the underworld to stand out of his reach. Minato collapsed from that mad grab. The white scales on Minato's face and arms receded and his teeth became normal. Blue smirked. "Tired, huh?" He shook his head, tooting. "Honestly, you lasted longer than I thought." The sniper pursed his lips, stroking his chin. "I'm impressed." Fire monster. It was the thing people called Blue when he became mad, the one where they say he stopped being human when he was pissed off. There was a good reason people only knew two separate occasions Naruto stopped being human: when Kurabi broke Yugao's knee and the time Blue snapped Fugaku's arm for leaving Itachi in the forest of death. It was tiring to maintain. That form required a physical and emotional commitment to the purest manifestation of madness and rage, warping his brain into condescending every person he stepped on in his feral anger, calling them insects or bugs. The perks was that he could tap into hellfire, limited semi-invulnerability and strength, and even a god complex. The Blue Uchiha made it a point to control his emotions to the best of his ability, or at least to not get mad enough to shift into fire monster. Blue was baffled how Minato could keep himself shrouded in hell's flames for so long, as that level of commitment to rage wasn't the least human thing he knew. It didn't particularly hurt while he was in that state, and it could remain indefinitely, but for however longer the flames stayed around him, the worse the exhaustion would be. If the flames dimmed even a little bit, it was essentially the beginning of the end. Minato had been a fire monster for 2 days and a few hours. The feeling was like having his lungs and bones weigh far heavier than if he was stepped on by the 8 tails, unable to properly move or breathe. Anger wasn't an emotion that could last for very long, so understandably Blue was baffled how Minato could stay mad for that long. He shrugged. It didn't matter before and it doesn't matter now. He pulled Minato off the ground by his hair, smiling at his heaving breaths and setting him back on his knees. "W8. The bone-tired Hokage whispered. Naruto cocked an eyebrow and squatted down to the other man's level, patiently waiting for his last plea for life. Please, Naruto, don't do this." The underworld mumbled in question. "Why shouldn't I do this?" Shina, was the murmured name he called, and Blue's serene gaze narrowed into a simmering glare. "Don't do it. Think about her. Your ex-wife Kushina?" Naruto confirmed, growing less irritated and more amused, wondering if the panic of death was bending the Namake's senses. "The one that wanted the divorce and doesn't want to willingly talk to you. Like the time Minato caught Kushina in class, and she later on punched him through the wall. That Kushina? She loves me, Naruto." He huffed, his shoulders sagged. "Since we were kids, she's crazy for me." "Oh yeah? Now's just an independence phase." "Really? If you harm me, she'll find out, and she'll hate you." "Are you sure?" Minato chuckled, breathless, sparing a sharp smirk. "You don't want her to hate you, do you, Naruto? Haven't you ever begged for your life?" "I mean," Naruto half smiled. "This is bad." Minato's eyes slowly bugged in realization that nothing would work against this blood-soaked marksman, and Blue went on ahead to describe what he had been expecting. "Blubbering tears running down your face, maybe some snot pouring from your nose, sweating like a pampered monkey stuck in the desert, crying for your master Jiraiya and praying that some act of mercy will save you from the inevitable. Naruto, I'm begging you, First, I'll be taking this." His left hand reached forward, index and middle finger jutting out to Minato's heart. His fingers hovered there and his Sharingan squinted, poking his tongue from the corner of his heart and taking proper aim. Right there. He stabbed through and punctured Minato's beating heart, pouring his hellish chakra into that small organ. The effect was immediate. The blonde seal master keeled forward, bleeding from his chest and gasping smoke. The area around Blue's fingers burned and blackened, lungs, ribs, muscles and skin. Minato's eyes bugged out, weeping red tears of blood and hacking painfully, no longer feeling blood being pumped around his body. His lungs shuddered and deflated. Adrenaline thudded hastily through his veins, fighting to keep up functioning of his other organs. It was all for nothing. Death took Minato. Naruto claimed his soul. He pulled his fingers from the corpse's chest and cleaned the blood in Minato's sunny yellow hair. Blue stood up and unsealed his tanto, making his way behind the Yandame's carcass and swiping the blade, cutting through Minato's neck. The Namikaze's head slid off his neck and fell to the earth. That was when his eyes fluttered open, lips flapping in futility to find words to describe the horrid sneak peek of the abyss Blue allowed him to see. Blue snapped his fingers and Minato's head burst on fire, burning a hateful blue tone that could never be extinguished. Even if Minato could talk, his screams of anguish and suffering wouldn't permit him to describe the extreme universe of pain burning his head to bone. And lastly, just 'cause I'm still pissed. He waved his right hand over his shoulder as the Shinigami poured out of Naruto's back. No longer was it an effigy of damnation, not after its demotion. It was a hobbled old skeleton, and wearing a mourning no mask. Over its brittle bones was a dark cloak. Blue understood that the Shinigami couldn't disobey Minato when he was summoned. Death's fault lay on the fact the underworld didn't get an apology. Blue wasn't above holding grudges. Pick him up, Naruto instructed, crossing his arms. Death silently did so, penitent, holding Minato's burning skull in both hands. He's your responsibility now. You're free to come back home in maybe a few 100 years. By then, toss Minato into the sea. Death nodded, rattling, and shuffled away into the distance, to wherever its legs took it. Its limited ability granted to him by Blue allowed him passage into other dimensions without fear of perishing. Imprisoned in the cramped space of his skull and cursed to burn till the end of time, Minato Namikaze's last tangible thought was that he should have left the Blue Uchiha well alone. Meanwhile, Naruto cast his soul into the lowest pit of the underworld, himself, and braced himself for what came next. A thin spiderweb of veins rose out from the corner of his right eye and he closed his left, concentrating on the right as it reached the final ocular evolution for his clan. The two triangles of his eternal eye cracked and broke apart, along with the black backdrop of his Dijitsu, letting bits of white seep through the darkness. The grim whites of his eyes were still black, though his blue iris shrank to a tiny dot in the center of his eye. 3 blue concentric circles rounded the dot, each sharing 3 blue tomo on each circle, totaling 9 tomo. It was different from what Naruto glimpsed from Kaguya, a red eye with black circles, and he didn't expect it to be the same. The Otsutsuki dimension moaned and the spot he stood on broke, depressing under the might of his accursed eye. Rinna Sharingan. His spiked crown of hellfire circled above his head. Completeness flowed through him. Knowledge flooded his mind. It was a lot. Information dating back to when the God Tree was a sapling and the planet was a vast, desolate void of water and fire, barren of life and will. Knowledge rightly lost, clans forgotten, and centuries at a time that were formerly a blip of obscurity unfurled before his eye and played in his head. Billions upon billions of worlds, universes and dimension, more so than he previously thought when he was incomplete, revealed themselves to him. Kingdoms being built and torn down, galaxies expanding and collapsing, cities of metal and magic, worlds of anthropomorphic animals, pantheons of all-powerful deities, an uncountable sum of alternate versions of himself, and a plethora of differing historical timelines. Omni-awareness of his very existence, seeing the foundations of the multiverse. Objects of power littering the cosmos, and not just that. Limitations he suffered when Minato contained half of his soul blew open, seeping into the realms of godhood. Naruto's demonic eye did not come from Kagaya's lineage. No. It was via his connection with the God Tree, the Crow contract, and thus the underworld, were formed from a single bark of that tree that fell into a pool of fire. Kagaya was not originally the manifestation of the koi fish contract, or the embodiment of heaven. She ate the fruit of the God Tree and was poisoned by the rawness of the chakra. Her clan searched the globe for a cure and came across the koi fish contract, which Kagaya later merged with in order to save her life. Her enslavement of the humans on the planet caused her two sons to rise up against her and battle her, until they just barely managed to win several months later by fashioning the moon as her immortal prison. The Otsutsuki clan rebelled because of the act of the two sons, but a few ninjutsu used by mistake from a young boy locked them away in their home dimension, isolated from the events of the planet. Blue blinked. He opened his other eye, the eternal Mangekyo whirling in the socket, and he frowned. So that's what you've been doing? He found Zetsu. Naruto's left eye sucked him into a kamui, and he came out at the Valley of End. Day was night. The dark sky was spotted with fiery stars. The mountainous statue of Madara Uchiha fallen, replaced by a spiraling pillar of whitish wood, imbued with the chakra Minato had when he was merged with Blue's half-soul. The pale moon hung close to Earth, pulled into the planet's orbit by the inferior God Tree. Zetsu was at the top, clinging to the tree and roaring in celebration, watching a white Zetsu clone of Minato Namake's finish the hand seals at the very same time Naruto summoned Amaterasu to burn the tree to nothing. Zetsu pushed off the tree as black fire consumed it, turning the clone to ash, hooting in spite of his treacherous descent. Naruto was too late. The moon bloomed like a flower, curling open and exuding immaculate light. The planet stopped. The wind itself was afraid to blow. People of the continent left their houses and gazed up, stunned by dread and toxic fear. Alarms blared across the continent, and guardians held their children close. Blue ground his teeth and his face steeled in resolution, sweeping the smoke and ash from the false god tree away to get a good look at the woman encased in the moon. A heavenly aura covered the goddess, floating there in the sky. Kagaya came out of the iridescent moon and her glorious Rinasharingan shone down on the world. Her noble smile bathed the world in magnificent peace, warming every soul to a blissful calm. Naruto's unholy Rinasharingan looked back, coupled with his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan and all the wrathful forces of the abyss. His teeming glare clashed against the woman's warmth. Blue! The goddess cooed, steadily unable to hold herself back, sending him a finger-wiggling wave. Hey! She trusted that by the time he lost all earthly connections, he would embrace her for all eternity, as they should. They were gods. Fate joined their paths from before they were born. He would soon understand that when all things passed and everything turned to dust, only they would remain. After all, they were gods. Life and death. Heaven and hell. Paradise and damnation. On that day, Kagaya and Naruto collided. Reality was never the same again. Quick pause, guys. If you are enjoying this story, please take 1 second to check if you are subscribed. I am trying to hit my first massive milestone of 1,000 subscribers, and every single one of you joining the community means the absolute world to me. Alright, let's see what Naruto does next. Chapter 17. Blue's Rinasharingan widened, pulsing and cancelling out the shockwave that rocked out from the heavenly eye in Kagaya's forehead, saving Fire Country from being rattled into the pit's chaos. Though a few tremors rolled through the nation. A corner of her lips flew up, and so did her right hand, palm facing the endless midnight sky and fingers outstretched as if to grip the very fabric of blackness that was the night. 10 truth-seeking balls formed beneath her, whirling soundlessly. The wind found its courage in Blue, flapping her imperial kimono about her, barely tousling the full length of her white hair. The man standing on the water, his knees bent in preparation, gnashed his teeth as his eternal Mangekyo eye recognized the jutsu she intended to drop on the planet, not from his memory but from the bottomless pit of knowledge that came with him being the underworld. At that point in time till this confrontation's conclusion, a good number of things the Blue Marksman knew and did was instinctive, coming from knowledge about the God Tree as well as understanding of the beginning of multiversal existence. It couldn't possibly be overstated how old and knowledgeable the semi-sentient god tree was. A black sphere with a hazy white shell expanded from the middle of her hand, formed from combining not just all 5 nature transformations but also yin-yang release, inflated much too quickly and far too large, roiling with controlled destruction contained in that massive ball of chakra the goddess of the moon easily hefted with a single hand. Expansive truth-seeking ball. Kaguya swept her hand down, throwing that giant ball of instant extinction onto the planet, intent on wiping out all life and splitting the world apart in ways it could never again be repaired. Both of Blue's eyes thrummed with power, and he burned his way up Hashirama Senju's statue. The world witnessed what happened next. The stillness in the air and the turgid petrification of the people made Blue's words sound far and wide. Reflection, Susanoo. He leaped off the tip of the Senju's finger, holding his hand out to catch Kaguya's wrath, just as his Susanoo exploded around him in all its infernal glory. It started off as an ethereal white skeleton, with a skull that had no mouth but 2 nose holes and 6 gaping holes for its 6 eyes, each holding eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, extending its right hand up and catching the ball of infinite darkness. Then tense blue chakra muscles and translucent chakra skin covered its creaking bones, struggling to hold against the sphere, and then segmented black around rippled over its body, resembling scales. White shin and forearm guards formed by themselves, and last metallic hood draped itself over the Susanoo's head in such a way that its 6 eyes glowed ominously. Blue bared his teeth, hovering in the chest of his creation, and roared as his Susanoo's elbow bent beneath the weight of Kaguya's death ball. Death's hands hadn't been able to bypass this ultimate defense, and yet the lady's death sphere was splintering the bones of his Susanoo. He pushed hard. His Sharingan bled. The ball blasted back to its sender, and the rabbit goddess merely absorbed it back into her limitless chakra network, tooting. All this effort for them. You're making this harder on yourself. Her voice was light and dignified, bearing a treble Noble's Blue had encountered spoke with and still layered with a longing warmth, directed solely at him. Just how long can you keep this up? Let's find out. Blue replied, blinking his bleeding right eye closed and smirking wildly with his Rinna Sharingan humming, festering to be unleashed. The crown floating above Naruto's head, filled with suffering souls, casually bobbed there. Gladly. Kaguya flushed, an expression that would have looked cute if not absurdly adorable if he didn't know she was capable of mass genocide, which she attempted not 10 seconds ago. Against his expectations, Kaguya beamed and opened her arms to welcome him, radiating gleeful anticipation. And he went for her. Tongues of fire and smoke curled out from the corners of Blue's mouth, his one open eye blazed and gravity propelled him upwards through his chakra construct, shooting out of its top left eye and flying to the Otsutsuki goddess. His body caught on fire from the speed, but his clothes didn't burn off his form. His fiery shoulder tackle ripped through 3 dimensions, opening a gaping hole in the reality of the elemental nations. It was nothing like getting sucked into the vacuum of space. The closest comparison was if a wall from the living room facing another home was torn down, letting those outside a good, hard look on the other side. In this case, walls were brought down so all occupants of the 3 houses could see the other. Anyone with good eyes that looked up saw the neighboring world set in other dimensions, all of whom looked back at them with bewilderment. The broken walls fixed themselves and closed as Blue's Susanoo dispersed. The 2 gods tumbled into a new dimension created entirely by the Blue Sniper. All there was to it was a large island situated on a lake of fire, barreling into a rock-hard palm tree. Both grunted on impact, Kaguya wheezing with a laugh and Blue grit his teeth in a hard grin. Her arms gently hugged him, purring not unlike a possessive cat. She didn't seem to mind the scorched spots on her midriff, damaging her kimono. Huh! He looked down between them, realizing that 4 bones from her ribs were pierced into his gut, cutting to the other side. The area whitened and became thinner, falling off in flax and cracking into dust as it spread. His eye dimmed sleepy. Neat trick. The princess smiled, rubbing his back as her ankle-length white hair covered them, murmuring into his chest. All killing ash bones. As the decay reached his nose, Blue opened his eternal eye and looked both eyes to the right before the woman's hair could completely cover his exit, projecting himself there by the time the blue in Kagaya's arms had finally turned transparent, falling away from her like a ghost. He dispelled himself as his eyes closed. The new Naruto whipped out a pair of kunai and spun them in his palms, observing his opponents for gaps with his too powerful dijutsu. She pushed off the tree and dusted down her tarnished dress, scoffing and pulling the bones that faded the old Naruto back into her body. Honey, you'll have to mean it if you really want to pin me down. All those centuries ago, the father of her sons couldn't handle her insatiable vigor, but she had great expectations for the blue god. He had a reputation among the ladies, she admitted with a bare twitch on her brow. Blue held the blades in a reverse grip, lowering his stance to something akin to a defensive position. What's your deal, lady? He asked, watching as she tied up her hair into a long ponytail. Why are you hellbent on destroying everything? I don't like sharing. For some seconds, all that was heard was the crackle of fire from the lake of flames and the hollow wind blowing heat about the dimension. Blue's eyebrows then went into his hairline. What? I don't like sharing, Blue, and I certainly won't be sharing you with anyone, she reiterated. Not with your mother, not with those cute children you're so fond of, pardon me if I don't remember their names, not with your mini playthings, not with those accountants that work for you, and definitely not with that confused redhead you're pining after. She shrugged casually. I want you all to myself, and I will give my all to you. Honestly, Blue, I can be very jealous at times. Kagaya swept her arms down her dress, reforming it with yin-yang released into an orange sports bra with dark ninja-grade tights and comfortable sneakers of a similar shade. On her forearms and shin, bright orange guards materialized, complementing her orange sports bra. Over her torso was a form-fitting, long-sleeved, mesh armor shirt, giving the man she liked a good view of her toned abdomen as well as the rest of her slender form. She didn't want to brag, but she looked good. Imprisonment in the moon did nothing to her body. Trust me, when this is said and done, you'll be thanking me. Connections like that can get really bothersome. Her truth-seeking balls vanished, bursting harmlessly and seeping into her being. The goddess couldn't help but blush at what she had in store for the Blue Uchiha. Oh, the things they would do. She was going to take her sweet time mapping every nook and cranny of his mind and body, understanding him down to the finer points of his entire being, like he would to her, memorizing the dips and curves of her everything till he could recite the details of her soul as if they were truly one person. They were the most perfect couple. The most perfect match. Their journey was already so close to beginning. The goddess could be patient, ease herself into his heart. Some alone time before we begin traveling won't be so bad either. We can really get to know each other. Properly fall in love. I'm sure you'll love me too. Unlike she hoped, Blue wasn't ogling her. He was trying his possible best to comprehend the absurdity of the words spilling from her lips. Basically, because he had friends, family, and a life of his own that didn't revolve or even involve her was why she wanted to obliterate their planet, start anew with them at the center of the universe. Possibly the multiverse as well. He shook his head, reorienting his brain, and promptly disappeared. Kagaya snapped her teeth shut and backtracked, seamlessly activating her Byakugan and powering up her godly eye. A halo ringed her head and Naruto's hellish crown hovered over his. Her horns didn't make her look devilish at all. That honor was reserved for the king of hell. Bones grew from her palms, and she crossed them over her chest, blocking a kunai aim to stab her heart. A bone fired out and clanged against the second blade, falling back and tucking into a roll as the underworld's strength overcame her, staying low in a crouch and digging her fingers in the sandy soil. She shot a bone to his position and bared her teeth when he deflected with the edge of the blade, spinning the weapon in his right hand and sending it to her face. The veins under and at the corners of her eyes throbbed, physically unable to move out of the way before the knife could bite into her temple. Her Rinna Sharingan pulsed and a shockwave threw away the weapon primed to stab that eye, and also snapping open a wide gorge between them on the island, not only pushing them apart but also splitting the solitary island in two. Blue stood fast, narrowing his eyes and sticking to the sand with his chakra, shrouding himself from the brunt of her eye blasts with his own godly dijutsu. Projection. Instantaneously, the man had crossed the wide gap she caused, and though her body was in top condition to avoid the blow, she didn't have the skills to. The woman hissed as his fist dug a hole in her gut, hitting so hard she flopped over his fist with her feet dangling from the ground. Hair-binding technique. She breathed out with barely a sound. As if having a mind of its own, the goddess's ponytail snapped around both of them, wrapping Blue in an unrelenting stranglehold that wasn't unlike being bound with rebar reinforced with titanium. All-killing ash bones. All over her body, her bones jutted out abnormally. The ones at her front ripped into the man and his Sharingan bugged out. He called 2 jutsus before he turned translucent. Black flames set the woman on fire and she chuckled, breathless, turning her head to the left and creating another shockwave with her Rinna Sharingan, diverting 5 Saban shots from the newly projected Blue, who was on the process of strapping the other twin to his left arm and raising that one against the goddess, summarily getting the 5 needles blocked. Kagaya clapped her hands together, irked by the black flames lapping at her pale features. 8 gods vacuum fist. Fist made entirely of vicious wind and heavenly chakra punched away the fire and destroyed what little was left of the island. Blue manifested his 6-eyed reflection Susanoo, standing on the lake of fire with it, and reloading the twin launchers, flipping through 5 seals inside and aiming his launchers at the Otsutsuki's levitating form. His Susanoo copied the motion. Ninja art, fall of the rising star. He and the Susanoo clenched their fists, releasing a needle from each twin launcher in faultless succession. Molten fire from the lake beneath honed up with the Saban and Kagaya, knowing better than absorb underworld chakra, raised an invisible shield about her. She grunted as the flames impacted her shield, covering her sight if she didn't have a pair of eyes that could see through everything. A harsh curse escaped her lips, soaring under a brazen punch from the Susanoo, but only flying headfirst into the knuckles of another Blue, projected inside her chakra shield. She laughed the cobwebs out of her head. The world warped around her, and she held the shirt of the Blue inside her guard, shifting dimensions into an icy, glacial world. The 2 rolled and fell down the face of an ice cap. Relentless cold bellowed and the world's axis constantly changed, battering Blue's self-awareness and understanding of direction. North, south, east and west teetered and merged, and so did up, down, left and right, making that icy world a landscape that eternally rumbled with indecision as to what where was at what time. Everything was and wasn't where it was supposed to be, and that twisted logic threw him off. Blue's feet pushed off the ice cap, baring his eyes and surrounding himself with a Susanoo ribcage right before he crash-landed at the peak of a mountain. Thud! What the hell? The world he looked at, there at the top of the snowy, icy mountain, seemed to come from an Uchiha's worst nightmare. The curvature of the planet, and apparently that entire universe, was infinitely inverted. He looked down, comforted by the snow and cold his ninja sandals were buried in, but on looking up he saw himself there as well, face twisted in utter confusion and still protected by the Susanoo ribcage. Not disturbed by the cold, he dispelled the Susanoo and squinted his eyes over the desolate planet, searching for the rabbit goddess. Kagaya ducked into a cave and exhaled, bringing about a landslide to hide the cave entrance, a hand on her chest and panting with exhilaration. She didn't honestly think the inversion of his rapidly assembled universe would keep her man down for long. His mind was too advanced for that, though she only needed a few seconds to breathe and come up with a plan. The woman understood one overarching thing: she couldn't ever hope to surpass the man's hand-to-hand prowess as she was. She was a princess. Her upbringing centered on ladylike etiquette, war strategy and clan leadership. The combative aspects of life were left for her clanmates. The battle with her sons was done completely with her chakra and her summons, but that was likely why inferior beings like them could manage to triumph over her. Against someone of equal power and status as her, this battle would end faster than she wanted, and at her loss too for that matter. Amaterasu flames roared over the howl of the wind, eating away at her hiding place. Her Byakugan peered through the rocky wall, and saw her fellow god pour the red-hot waters of the Sanzu River to chip away to get to her. He couldn't project into the cave because he could neither see inside the cave nor find an entrance. He could sense her, though. Lesser men would strain themselves in search of her, but he knew where she was without fault. In spite of the danger she would be in when he finally got to her, she sighed sweetly. Summoning jutsu. Koi fish swam out from nowhere, revolving around the interior of the cave. Like with Blue's crows calling up souls from their eternal punishment, she could call down souls from eternal paradise. Shinobi can go to heaven too. She found 4 souls that had what she needed and absorbed them into herself, sealing their consciousness in an inescapable oblivion while stealing their abilities for herself. Hashirama Senju, Shodame Hokage and God of Shinobi. Ishiki Otsutsuki, the person she first thought was a god. Yahiko, first leader of the Akatsuki. Konan, angel of Amigakure. The last person didn't exactly die and go to heaven, but rather was in an out-of-body trance hurtling through space all the way back in Blue's home dimension. Ishiki would always have place in her heart. The memory of her blasting open his skull was something she fondly went back to whenever she felt down. As the cave wall exploded inwards, courtesy of a punch from the Blue Uchiha, Kaguya was completely imbued with the collective hand-to-hand prowess of 4 legendary ninjas. Her Rinna Sharingan widened. Universal pull. Reflection. The Rinnegan Jutsu hit Blue's unique Sharingan Jutsu, reversing the effect. Instead of him shooting to her, she was whipped over to him, cutting off her Jutsu mere yards from a front kick aimed at her chest and sliding under the attack. He snapped around with a roundhouse kick and she blocked with her right forearm, taking that arm down and clashing against another kick for her side, and leaned away from a blistering elbow strike that barely scraped her jaw. He didn't question her newfound taijutsu skills, pressing harder to land a blow and prevent a counter from hitting. The world's axis points turned, and so did Blue's Sharingan. Kaguya shifted away from a right hook, sidestepped a knee to her gut, and grunted as her chakra-blazing right palm was slapped upwards, leaving her torso wide open for 2 decisive punches until she brought her airborne right elbow down on Blue's wrists, lifting her left shin and using the guard there to block a side kick, dropped her leg and used her hands to push away another wild kick, covered her chest with her forearms against a hook kick and skidding back a few feet from the power loaded. In that guarded strike, she barreled back to him and he sped to her, smashing forearms as they met. Chakra rippled outwards. Boom! The inverted dimension groaned and snowy avalanches poured down mountains. The princess beamed and her halo shone, pulling her left forearm back and driving her right fist into Blue's diaphragm, eliciting a wheeze from the man and retaliating by driving his left knuckles into her chin, taking 3 steps back and lifting an arm to her. Her pale eyes glinted as she ran around him, hardly dodging each senbon and leaving behind a trail of afterimages until both twins ran out of needles, whereupon she called out a truth-seeking ball and bound to him, extended it to 6 foot long as she leaped up, gripping it in both hands and smashing it down on his overhead forearms, making sparks rain from contact with his mid-range launchers. Blue guided the vicious bash to his right in one smooth motion, also burying a knee into her gut, and whacking her wrists one with the edge of his right hand, making her release the elongated chakra rod. Faster than anticipated, she regained composure after dropping the rod, and a chakra-laced palm raced up and collided into his chest. It didn't carry a full hip rotation or a complete extension of her arm given her bent, disadvantaged position, but the sharp burst of chakra as her hand touched his shirt pushed him away, righting again though not predicting the leg sweep that took her to the icy ground. Chakra ebbed from their bodies, oozing from their pores. Her 3 eyes bugged wide and she rolled away from an axe kick, missing her head by a hairbreadth. Their fight turned ice to water and water to vapor, clouding their vision somewhat as they steadily descended the frozen platform, tunneling down using only rapid, unyielding combat alone. Instead of reaching the world's core, the pair fell through the ice into endless space, stubbornly clashing in an oddly harmonic battle for physical and mental supremacy. Acknowledging that he couldn't fly like the rabbit goddess, floating in the void of space while still being able to breathe perfectly fine, Blue was finding it harder to gain an upper hand against the woman that had essentially been flying since she was a young girl. He did the next best thing. Universal pull. He yanked her to him, and her hands curled around his neck, blue painted talons digging into his throat as he backflipped with her into another dimension. That new world wasn't one either of them created. Any subsequent dimension change was due to it being either the closest or furthest from Blue's home dimension depending on the fighter that manipulated teleportation with their Rinna Sharingan dash, and seemingly the most random pick out of the countless multitude. Their multiversal battle took them to many places. "What do you think you're doing, hag?" Yujito asked, finished packing up her things from her hotel room in Zayuki and now carrying a hand-sized scroll in a pocket of her Kumo Jounin flak jacket. Orochimaru bit her tongue and paused, fingers digging deep grooves on a metal table. "Don't push me, ni Yujito. I was curious," the Jinchuriki of the two-tailed cat said defensively, as if her words before were meant to be taken as a compliment. She entered the dark-skinned Sanin's operating room, curling her lips down at the blood-chilling tools hung up on the walls and neatly arranged on a tray. "For your information, I'm waiting to hear from Kabuto. She went to Konoha to check on Itachi." Her black-painted fingernails scraped deeply into the operating table, showing her nerves only like that and maintaining utter facial serenity. Blue's disappearance to heaven knows where was wearing thin on her, especially with who he was facing. "If there's a problem, then she will reverse summon me and I'll take the boy to safety. What about Shursui, Izumi and Sasuke?" She snorted, amused Yujito would even bring them up. "They're none of my concern." Both Kunoichi saw the goddess of the moon, and they also witnessed the Otsutsuki's 2 attempts at global annihilation. That scale of warfare long since departed from mortal comprehension. The snake sage understood that everything now depended on her son, and he was the most capable to defend all of existence, but that didn't stop her from worrying. Not for the fate of the world but on Blue's health. She was still his mother. The man sat them down, her, Yujito, Yugao, Kabuto and the Iron Accountant, and told them Kagaya was determined to fatally sever his ties with the world. He entrusted them to look after his family, and as far as the Sannin knew, Itachi was the only other part of their family. Yugao was a tolerable though Orochimaru wasn't entitled to look after her. Last she heard, Kushina was heading an investigative team to the Valley of End, where the 2 powerful people were last seen. Orochimaru didn't care though. Itachi's safety was her concern. To him, those kids might as well be as important as Itachi. Yujito spoke slowly, coming around to the table and narrowing her eyes at the Sannin. "You know that, right? Why are you still here?" "What?" "You're like a fly that follows a corpse to the grave. Naruto isn't here, and speaking to me won't get you into my good graces. I dislike your kind, constantly searching for someone bigger and stronger to cling onto, to leech off. Every girl that gravitates to him is like that, prissing and preening like feeble peacocks. The only thing keeping my hands from ripping out that filthy, pebble heart of yours isn't my boy but my bearing self-restraint." The mocha brown-skinned lady closed her golden yellow eyes and inhaled a shallow breath, exhaling and balling her hands into fists, fitting into the deep grooves she left there through her blistering rant. "Do what you want, ni Yujito. Go to Konoha and watch over those 3 children, or seek out that annoying Uzumaki for a little cat fight, I don't care. Just leave, before my curiosity on your chakra network becomes too much to control." Unafraid, the blonde ninja placed her hands on her hips. "Are you done?" Snarling a little, Orochimaru answered. "Yes. I'm done. When you've cooled down, and you can hold a sensible conversation, I'll be in your room. I made curry and rice." The Sannin's glaring eyes followed the Kumo ninja as she sauntered out of the gruesome operating room. "Hag." Orochimaru's chakra flared at Yujito's parting word and the metal table snapped in 2. There was a faint tug at the pit of her stomach and she followed it immediately, without hesitation or delay. On the other side, in Konoha, an Otsutsuki wearing a veil was sitting down on the right shoulder of a bigger, bullier Otsutsuki, at the wreckage of the Senju clan compound, where Kabuto called her mistress. The dark-skinned snake sage stood in front of her student's crumpled form, hands at her sides and eyes narrowed into thin, irritated slits. Mamashiki tapped his chin. "My lady called." "Iruru, go put on a shirt," Kobayashi scolded, feeling a vain throb on her brow at the big-breasted dragon brazenly saunter into the living room, fresh from a bath and clad in a pair of panties that were far too small for her. Iruru groaned. I still don't understand you humans' fixation on clothing. It's called common decency. We live in a society, the office lady retorted, pinching the bridge of her nose to stave off an impending headache at yet another long-winded chat about clothes with the annoyingly innocent, and yet still perverted, fire dragon. Days like this, she honestly thought Iruru was rubbing those giant flesh bags in her face, even though Kobayashi had made peace with her washboard flat chest. Put something on! She pulled up the sleeve of her suit jacket and checked her watch, sighing at the time. Now I'm going to be late for work. Toru came into the main room, carrying a tote bag in the crook of her right elbow and brushing off lint from her maid outfit. She said in a chipper voice, and the owner of the apartment heard some underlying intent in her voice. I can always fly you to work, Miss Kobayashi. My back can't take any more of your flying. The human lady ignored the utter heartbreak in Toru's red-orange reptilian eyes. Toru sulked her way to the front door. She looked around to the fire dragon as she wiggled into a long, somewhat baggy shirt, reaching above her knees and sliding down on shoulder. Don't you have to go to work at the candy store? Today's my day off, but I'll drop by in a few hours to go and tease Take. Her delivery wasn't deadpan but filled with honest curiosity on why humans got so flustered seeing her chest, especially that boy, Take. Poor boy couldn't ever catch a break with Iruru. Kobayashi shrugged. Kanna! Hurry dash! Just as she finished, the little, white-haired dragon bounced out from inside with her bag. She bent her head and Kobayashi gave her a ceremonial hair tousle, nudging her to the door. Don't bother that kid too much. Iruru grunted and leaped onto the couch, flicking on the television. Kobayashi, Toru and Kanna left the apartment complex and were treading down the street. The younger dragon was walking on a yellow line close to the pavement, balancing like her life depended on it, and Toru was busy proposing the health benefits of Kobayashi eating her tail. It won't be poisoned. I promise. No. It was just too weird. What if I barbecue it and mix in some beef? No. It's got dragon nutrients. She said it like that would be enough to convince her sworn mistress after months of prodding and proposing. I'm not a dragon. Humans can eat it too. Still, no. Toru stopped mid-walk and Kobayashi turned to her, an eyebrow raised. What's wrong? The exceptionally powerful dragon's reply was her baring her teeth, and her eyes went up in flames. She sprinted to her mistress and picked her up in her arms, bridal style, tossing Kanna over her shoulder. Alarmed, Kobayashi exclaimed. What's dash? BSSHHH. The street behind them shattered like fragile stained glass, and two people fell out, cracking the concrete as they tumbled. The crack in reality sealed a little, but the blackness of space leaked in. Some bits and pieces of reality littered the road. In the fray of their mangled roll down the downward sloping street, Blue got his foot in Kagaya's stomach and gave a mighty push, ripping her hands from his neck and sending her down the street. She gained control of gravity and slowed herself in the air, falling down on her hands and feet. He rolled to his feet and fluidly flicked through some hand seals. Fire release, fireball of decimation. Kagaya had already finished with her own set of seals. Water release, tears of the kraken. Doom. The two opposing jutsus collided in the narrow street, and their worlds stopped turning. Gravity faltered. More dragons? Kobayashi roared, looking around the dragon maid and grunting as Toru dropped her at the top of a building, a safe distance from the clashing attacks. They didn't give off dragon vibes. One was an angelic woman with heavenly beauty, wearing a sports bra, tights and sneakers with forearm and shin guards, while the other was a pale man with a hellish crown bobbing over his head, in a long-sleeved black shirt, black pants and sandals of the same tone, along with bandages wound around his feet. The woman had ankle-length white hair tied into a ponytail, milky white eyes like she was blind and an odd eye on her temple. The man on the other hand had black hair with a blonde streak traveling down the front to the right, also bearing odd, blue-tinted eyes. Realizing herself, Kobayashi yelled, "The town! Save the town!" The magic needed to shield teleport those two beings was monumental. Fortunately for Toru, Irura dashed out of their apartment at the very sound of reality snapping and cracking. Blue was the first to cut his jutsu short, blazing around the typhoon of water rumbling up the street, wall running and flipping on residential houses until his left uppercut hit the woman's throat. Boom! Kagaya blasted off the ground in a blip of fire and light. Electricity shut off across a quarter of the country, and the weather roiled with indecision, confused by the drastic increase in temperature, as well as the radical drop in heat. The underworld's Susanoo exploded around him, propelling him up to his briefly dazed opponent. The woman would have torn through an airplane if Toru's dragon form didn't shoulder check her out of the way, basically shattering all the bones in Toru's shoulder for her effort. Kagaya roared over the bellow of high-altitude wind, angered at irksome dragon. 8 gods vacuum fist! The fists of wind and chakra battered about her, crushing an arm of Naruto's Susanoo and bursting open the end of the airplane. Blue ran through the gaping tatters of that arm before he dispelled it, but had to cover his face and neck with his forearms when 2 fists raced to his form. He didn't have time to fashion a proper reflection. He fell down not unlike a meteorite. If he reached the earth, it would be yet another extinction event in human history, but probably one they wouldn't bounce back from. Iruru opened a gate on the ground and the man was sent to a barren plain in her home world. Still the shockwaves reached Earth. Iruru lost her arms as a result. Kanna flew up and guided the airplane to the ground as safely as she could given the circumstance, and Toru mustered the last of her stamina and opened a gate to her home world, casting Kagaya and her fists there to continue whatever quarrel with that demonic man. When she was done, she landed and allowed herself the luxury of unconsciousness. As if they hadn't been interrupted, the 2 gods clashed, each strike reverberating across the new planet. Fist countered fist, shin countered shin, blows rained and counters rose. Then Kagaya got into Blue's guard and slammed her right hand into his neck, sweeping his feet out from under him and choke slamming him into another dimension, smashing through a dining table and interrupting an outdoor dinner among friends celebrating the ejection of Mongol invaders from Iki Island. Jin Sakai, the ghost of Tsushima, leaped away and drew his blade, so did the numbers of Iki raiders, shouting in surprise and apprehension at the 2 people that broke the long table to pieces. The pair were far from caring about the aggression of outsiders. Kagaya was straddling Blue, cracking her knuckles into the Blue Uchiha's guard in a relentless ground and pound assault primarily used by mixed martial artists. Errant shards of reality fell on them and the broken reality above oozed with the last dimension they were in, though not enough to pour inside. The Uchiha grunted with each block strike and glossated around his guard, forcing a pulse from his Sharingan and projecting over her, falling down with an elbow drop to the small of her back. Both heaven and hell fell through the ground and into another dimension. Kagaya stumbled into a kitchen, wherever the hell they were, and her back hit the counter. Finding her wherewithal like so many times before, she adapted and a hand blindly flew to her right, snagging a frying pan. Her Byakugan was on fire. The house was still, though for only 5 seconds. From the pitch darkness outside the kitchen, 5 needles raced to her face and she deftly banged the frying pan to divert them, finding a kitchen knife with her left hand and shooting it back alongside a well-placed gravity push. There was a grunt, accompanied by a maniacal laugh before a crazed clown was chucked back at her, her knife deeply embedded between his eyes. Pennywise hooted and Kagaya drove him away with a backhand across the face, but unintentionally left her middle open for a Spartan kick, breaking her through the wall and harshly landing in another reality. Miles Morales bobbed his head to the tunes pouring into his head from his headphones, working on a class assignment due the next day. He promised his parents he'd at least try with Brooklyn Vision Academy, totally oblivious to the godly pair tumbling through his room and smashing into a different world. The future Spider-Man jerked at the small shake and looked back, groaning. "Gang, come on! Clean up your stuff, man!" Thanos chuckled and held up the Infinity Gauntlet, while the Avengers watched on, powerless. "I am inevitable." Tony Stark made to rush in to make a swift Infinity Stone exchange, till the sound of glass breaking halted him. "BSSSHHHH. Guh. Beasts ambled from the rift in reality. One was a mountainous, snow-white creature with a bloated body and two prominent rabbit ears that could vaguely be differentiated from its four curved horns. From where most thought were its mouth came jagged fangs, and it had one single eye, red with black rings as well as 9 commas shared in each ring. 10 tails swayed hypnotically from its back, a few shorter tendrils sprouted from its body, and last were the 10 truth-seeking balls revolving around it, though none of he witnesses knew that. The ghastly creature wrapped 5 of its tails around 2 of Thanos' ships, hopping back and landing, creating shockwaves that briefly switched off Earth's gravity, and threw the mad Titan's ships at the gaping hole that was the rift in reality. Another beast clambered into that universe. Some thought it was Cthulhu. Some prayed it wasn't Dormammu. This was Naruto's 10-tailed beast form. It was a behemoth, black hole of a thing that easily eclipsed the planet, weighing down their universe alongside the unfathomably massive white creature. It was miles upon miles of endless darkness, so tall and so foreboding Thanos forgot himself and stepped away. 4 horns jutted from the top, presumably the crown of its head, and the ends of the horns were a blazing hot red. Its arms opened wide, and if it hadn't done that no one would have known this thing had arms, and its own 10 tails flared behind him, his 10 truth-seeking balls spiraled. And its eye. This vision of death and damnation scarred those with the willpower to remain conscious, and it was something they would never overcome. It followed them to their dreams and haunted their waking nightmares. Its mouth opened and they saw rows and rows of pristine white teeth winding down to the bottomless infinity of hellish abyss, and chakra gathered before it. It aimed at Thanos' spaceships, the ones Kaguya threw. It spoke. Giant 10-tailed spinning ball. Not only did the beam of pure chakra obliterate the spaceships, it also indiscriminately vaporized anything in its path, turning flesh to nothing in a span of microseconds. Finally, the beam struck Kaguya and she fell on an assembly of Avengers and Thanos' soldiers too slow to get away on time. Thanos bellowed and held his gauntlet to the blue-tailed beast, calling on the Mind Stone. He didn't stand a chance. Blue glanced down at him. The fires of hell burned angrily in his one Rinna Sharingan eye. The first indication Thanos got that he was way over his head was when the stone he used dulled and popped. Then the fire monster stepped on the Mad Titan. Whatever luck shone on Steve Rogers, Tony Stark, Thor and the other Avengers facing Thanos blared brighter as Blue gave a bored grunt and rumbled to Kaguya, who was slowly rising up. The beasts but heads and that alone cracked reality. Growing physically tired, Kaguya reduced in size to her humanoid form and pulled him inside as he followed suit, returning to a human form, taking them elsewhere. She hoped her clanmates were making progress in destroying the elemental nations. Konoha. The issue wasn't killing an Otsutsuki, it was killing many at once. War came to the elemental nations, descending like angels from the heavens. Hundreds of thousands of them, bearing Rinnegan and the bloodline of the rabbit goddess. Their instructions weren't to burn the planet but to subdue it, ready it for their mistress's annihilation. That didn't mean their methods weren't heavy-handed. Orochimaru held up Nagato's head by his red hair, and the corpse's Rinnegan eyes flared open, forming a chakra absorption barrier and carving a clear path into the Uchiha clan compound as she barreled headfirst inside, pushing and shoving aside anyone not quick enough to get out of her way and summarily sapping whoever of their vitality once they glanced her chakra barrier. Kusanagi oozed with her custom blend of poisons and toxins, as well as the red life fluid of Otsutsuki that formerly blocked her path to the clan of Sharingan holders. The woman stopped when she got to the clan head's house, where battles raged hardest, and smelled the air with her tongue, taking a hard left to Blue Street. Everyone that could hold up their hands was fighting. Elders too old for combat were herding young children into the forest till the threat died down. The Blue Uchiha knew what was happening, and although he couldn't be there in person to defend his clan, he did the next best thing for someone with his command of the denizens of the underworld. He summoned the dead to fight for his friends. Any ninja or samurai that fell was promptly brought back, albeit having the brief scarring memories of falling down the abyss, but more or less ready to jump back into the fray regardless of the injuries that killed them. Any Otsutsuki that was defeated had their souls swapped with a long-since-dead shinobi of the continent to fight against the Astral Clan. Kinshiki, for example, was apparently the Nidaime Hokage Tobirama Senju. In order to not divide his attention between fighting Kaguya and selecting what soul went into which body, Blue gave that responsibility to his crow's summons. There wasn't much he could do for his civilian friends, only send his crows to guide their souls to a restful afterlife. He hoped to resurrect them when all was said and done. He hoped. The man's mother found Shursui tending to Itachi's dislocated right knee and a sprained ankle, twisting his ankles too and effectively stunting his ability to run, while Izumi was doing her best with her bow staff to defend her friends against the mute Otsutsuki woman wearing a pink jumpsuit. Sasuke was crying. Blue's nephew spotted Orochimaru first, running to them and replacing Nagato's head with a medic kit, ready to handle first aid. The snake Sanin's chakra was too toxic for medical ninjutsu. Help her! The Lady Izumi was tussling with manipulated gravity and yanked the Uchiha girl's bow staff out from her hand, as if attracting it by magnet, bringing it down on the 12-year-old's shoulder and arcing her foot up, deep into the girl's gut. She looked down on Izumi with her pale lavender eyes, gripping the staff in both of her hands and deftly bent the thick metal weapon into a circle, carelessly dropping it on Izumi's weeping body. The scientist ignored the young boy's order and knelt down by him, knowing well that the jumpsuit lady was more in the mood for setting an example that she didn't mind maiming children than outright killing them. Itachi pushed away from her hands, flinching at the sharp pain. Help her! Stay still, brat! She snarled, gripping his leg in a firm hold, about to snap the dislocated knee back in place for the meantime. The dark-skinned Sannin glanced at a mortified Shursui. Her golden yellow eyes narrowed. Give him something to bite on and hold him still. The speedster, on the other hand, cast his 3-tomo Sharingan to the pale woman that had fractured Izumi's collarbone, positively trembling at the agonized moans from his friend at his inability to help. Orochimaru snapped, unmindful of Izumi's suffering and the mute Otsutsuki's fascinated Byakugan gaze at them. Damn it, I'll do it myself! Itachi struggled, hitting her hands with his fists, but not able to carry much strength in them. Help her! He wept, crying and pleading to one of the few of ninjas he trusted in the world. He fell back, pale from injury and tiredness, covering his eyes and his elbow. He begged her one last time. Granny, please, help her! And she listened. She didn't want to, but she listened. Orochimaru always wanted to be a grandmother. I'll... She stumbled on her words, growing emotional and biting her tongue at the happy sob bubbling up her throat at Itachi's acknowledgement. Stay down, brat. I'll be right back. She directed an unrelenting look at the other Uchiha boy, also exhausted from the fight but rearing to get up and support the renegade Sannin. Look after him, them. She corrected herself, providing a pill bottle and a bottle of water. That's an experimental blend. A high-rate painkiller but still in the experimental phase. Give 2 tablets to him and make sure he's sitting up by the time he downs them. It's very important he's upright. Can you do that? Shursui bit his bottom lip and nodded, collecting the painkillers and the water bottle. Great. The mocha-brown-skinned lady smirked, an invisible twitch of her lips and a resigned dip of her brow. She grumbled as she got to her feet. The things I do to be a granny. She certainly didn't think her son would give her grandbabies, and constantly suggesting for him to settle down with Kabuto was heading nowhere. Orochimaru couldn't ever have natural children of her own, Naruto being a miraculous case, and being his mother opened to her a world of glorious possibilities, filled to the brim with love, happiness, uncertainty, and familial unity. For once, when she didn't want to have children, she now wanted an army of offspring born from her womb. Her hope had been on her son, and that was now more or less out of the question, with how Blue was resolute to not settle down in the near or distant future. Blood-related grandbabies with a woman she approved for him was a dream within a dream for the sulking snake Sannin. It's too bad. Her son and her protege would have made such beautiful babies. Orochimaru would have spoiled them fat. Mustering her determination, she got up and readied herself with the dreaded long sword. The Otsutsuki's eyes lifted from Izumi's airless whimpering and she sighed in exasperation on seeing the snake Sannin sprinting to her, hissing a blood-freezing sound and gathering nature chakra to herself. Sage mode. The rabbit goddess crash-landed on a moving car, crumpling in the roof and injuring the family of 4 inside. With a strained groan, she rolled to the side and fell on her knees. There was a nasty bruise on her gut, a purpling injury underneath her mesh armor and beneath her sports bra, marring her immaculately fair skin. Not yet breaking the skin or pulling blood, but nonetheless smarting like an annoying bee sting. In an instant she healed the wound and materialized bandages to cover the now graying bruise, though the dull throb was always there. Kaguya staggered up to her feet. Omni-Man flew down to her, concern etched on his face. He spoke to her curtly, hovering in the air with his arms crossed. "Miss, are you okay?" She neither deemed him a look nor an answer, ignoring his existence and searching around the hysteria for the love of her life, a growing smile lifting the corners of her lips. The woman had fallen down on traffic and people were getting out of their cars, looking over at her with faces mixed with concern and impatience, wanting Omni-Man to pick her and the wrecked car and take them away so traffic could move again. Her Byakugan flicked left and right. Transforming into the respective final forms of the 10-tailed beast meant that they lost control of their otherworldly chakra, letting it envelope them in all its totality, and having the presence of mind to use a tailed beast attack of that magnitude while warring with their primal urge to destroy all life could rip a mind to pieces. She might have been injured physically, but Blue was suffering many mental aftershocks at one time, which was by far the worst kind of pain. Kaguya had briefly succumbed to the allure of pure insanity during that moment. She was a tailed beast, though realized herself later and fell victim to Blue's vaporizing blow, focusing on the pain of her injury to wake up and regain control of her chakra. The tried and tested thing to do while in that beast form, in cases like theirs, was to allow their chakra run wild but keep their consciousness in the furthest reaches of the background, so that when the insane 10 tails was inevitably struck by an outside force, whether they kicked a pebble or were blasted with an attack dash, they would focus on that sensation and pull themselves together. Even though Blue was conscious and in control throughout his rampage, it was likely that the sensation that he grasped to suppress the chakra once more was when that Thanos attempted to hypnotize him. Forget being the incarnation of death and damnation, hypnotizing an Uchiha was a bad idea. In the Mad Titan's defense, he didn't know that. But does that matter now? Blue had the Rinna Sharingan and the ageless knowledge of the God Tree, so before Naruto took control of his uncontrollable beast form he was well aware of the consequences. It spelled how badly he wanted her gone. Kaguya wasn't thinking that, though. What was in her serene mind was on the fact that both life and death lost control of their chakra at the same time made her more chipper, humming sweetly and sweeping all 3 of her eyes around the cosmos for her missing man. Could there be a greater sign that they were meant for each other? The pain may or may not pass. That depended entirely on him, but she would be there to help him recuperate. "Blue!" she trilled, singing his name. Omni-Man swept over to her front, tilting his head to the side and taking in her features with simmering worry as he noted the ring dye on her temple. "Miss, who are you, and are you in any kind of trouble?" She rolled her eyes, about to pass him. Then he touched her arm. Her Rinna Sharingan pulsed. Omni-Man woke up on Mars, worse for wear and unable to breathe. The force of Kaguya's unworded almighty push knocked the planet a bit off orbit, losing up to 20 hours in the process, decimating anything in a 10-mile radius of her. Valley of End. A tick throbbed on Kushina's brow, landing on a rock face after yet another mighty gravity push and sticking fast to the surface with her chakra. "You're really pissing me off, stranger." She dropped down to the water and charged Jirashiki. Multiple shadow clone technique. A tidal wave of redheads dropped on the Otsutsuki, while the original stayed back and bit down on a chakra pill. She'd never had reason to use one, given how nearly bottomless her reserves were, but she was burning through her well of energy faster than her regeneration could replenish. Those chakra pills were so unused they could be expired. Kushina checked the pill bottle of chakra pills Chusa Akimichi handed her some years ago, sighing in relief that the pills had 1 more year before expiry. She hardened her resolve and blurred to her opponent, trusting her comrades to fight for themselves against the horde of Otsutsuki that descended on them. His head was pounding. His vision was blurry. His hands were shaking. Merciless tremors rocked his spirit. Thundering clouds surrounded his brain. Bile rose up from his stomach and he exhaled throw up, toppling to his knees and tossing his head down. It was a pain unlike anything within comprehension, best compareth by combining a horrible migraine with a fatal concussion. He blinked off his Sharingan, as it seemed to be making his sense of balance worse, and he closed his left eye, heaving on the ground bloody chunks, realizing that he was throwing up into a ratty old fedora. He neither knew nor did he care when or how he snagged the hat. The man's blue eye clouded over and he gripped his head, his mouth falling open in mute agony at the intense ringing coupling the violent shaking. Pressure built up in his skull. Blood leaked from his ears and nose. His eye was bloodshot. Blue groaned hollowly and fell to his side, tormented further by the sounds of the city. Wherever he was, he didn't have the luxury of relaxing in a dark and quiet room to ward off the banging in his skull. Meditating was crossed out too. Kaguya. She would find him soon. He staggered to his feet but fell sideways, hitting the wall. The man couldn't see anything, blinded by his headache. Blue exuded heat. He needed to cool down. In spite of all this, the Blue Uchiha focused the thread of his awareness to his sensory ability and limped from the alley, crossing the street. A car ran into him. It melted like the tar road Blue walked on. A scream sounded at the sopping pool of metal blanketing the driver, a shrieking noise adding to the disorganized concerto clamoring inside his head. The front entrance of a butcher's shop fell to the heat, and he made his way to the back room, glaring his bloodshot eye at the two butchers armed with cleavers. He entered the cold storage, slamming the doors shut after himself as the butchers called the police. Thump! Silence. The small window looking into the meat cold storage fogged up with vapor, then the temperature suddenly plummeted, not just in that room but for the whole building, spreading outwards and drastically cooling down the street. A few seconds before, inside the cold storage, Blue used the reprise of the cold storage on his headache to make more cold. Water and wind release, combination jutsu, corrupted frozen wasteland. He spent 4 minutes locked in there, stewing in the frigid cold and gathering his senses, and during that time police officers evacuated the building and formed a perimeter around the entrances. I've got this, guys. Invincible came down from the sky, seemingly from the heavens, and flagged for the officers to stay put, carefully stalking through the burned-down door, following the depressed footprints left in the wake of that fire monster. He shivered and rubbed his hands together, wondering aloud. Who is this guy? A misguided hero? A new villain? Whoever it was, Invincible was going to handle the situation. His dad trusted him to do this while he went and brought in the lady that fell on that car. Omni-Man's son tore open the door to the cold storage and caught the underworld as he was strapping on his kunai and shuriken pouches to each of his thighs with his gloved hands, wearing a fresh set of the same clothes and clean of his previous sick. The headache was still there, lingering somewhere in the back of his head, but all he had to do was avoid strenuous techniques. He snorted at his self-diagnosis. The most he could do for now was to keep his Rinna Sharingan eye closed and for his Sharingan to not evolve past the 3-tomo stage, albeit now the eye was deactivated. Simply put, any technique that required higher than his 3-tomo would land successfully, but end up leaving him in a state he wouldn't be able to continue the fight in. Using his Rinna Sharingan would hurt like hell though wouldn't cripple him as quickly or as fatally as his eternal Mangekyo eye would. Kaguya wouldn't exactly be worse off than him, though she wouldn't be better. She would be winded and more susceptible to physical injuries, especially the internal kinds. That was the stage of the fight they were in. Sharp icicles dangled from the ceiling and the slabs of beef strung up on hooks were frozen solid in thick ice, needing more than chisels and hammers to chip them out. Chainsaws, probably. Invincible judged the situation differently, seeing the man attach those weapon pouches look like he was ready to draw them. That's not going to work on me. Blue's brow creased. I don't think we've met. I'm invincible. Uh-huh, the Uchiha replied, delayed at the obnoxious boy's words. He couldn't understand a word the kid was saying. Not one thing. He finished up and was idly checking the launchers on his forearms, walking to the door. The brightly colored boy didn't move, so the man patiently said, Excuse me. Mark Grayson's superhero alter ego shook his head at Blue's move to pass him, not completely sure he knew what language that short statement was from. "I'm sorry. I can't let you go. You've caused too much trouble and I've got to take you in." Naruto's blue eye stared at the boy and the boy maintained eye contact. On another day and in other circumstances, Blue would have been glad to immerse himself in other languages and other cultures, like he had been doing all his life while traveling the elemental nations, but now he was getting irritated. The woman he was fighting wouldn't teleport herself back to his home dimension, but would rather subdue him and make him watch as she turned that planet to nothing. Back home, Orochimaru and the others were putting up a hell of a fight against the goddess's clanmates, and with a bit more time they would find a way to prevail, given the semi-immortality he'd briefly granted the fighters of the planet, and the fact he was reusing Otsutsuki bodies to house foreign souls to lash back against the invaders. Blue's job was to handle Kagaya. This boy spouting confusing sounds from his mouth, was in his way. Knowing fully well that the brightly colored boy didn't understand him, Blue still said, "I'm going to put you to sleep now, okay? If you'll just dash." Quicker than light, Blue tapped his forehead with his pointer and middle finger, and Invincible's eyes rolled up into his head. The hero slammed down to his knees and fell back, lying unconscious in that uncomfortably arched position. Thankfully for the teen, all the Uchiha did was strike his temple, whereupon a short shockwave met a sensitive nerve at the sides of Mark's head. "Huh!" Naruto walked over the boy. "The costume's a bit hard to look at, but to each their own, I guess." There were some alternate versions of Naruto that loved wearing neon orange and worshipped ramen, so the Uchiha didn't judge. As he moved to the door, he reloaded his twins, summoning a flurry of feathers to his right hand after doing so and materializing crystalline. He popped out the cartridge and checked the round of projectiles, humming and slapping it back inside, cocking it and smirking at the satisfying click afterward. He emerged from the door, one hand holding the grip of his weapon and the other running a finger under his nose, wincing at the blood. That harmless takedown he did on that yellow kid shouldn't have been so stressful. On sight, the police officers began yelling, ducking behind their squad cars and arming themselves. "He's got a gun! He's got a gun!" They pointed their pistols at him. Naruto was taken aback by this reception, correctly judging that they were pointing weapons at him. Instinctively, his hands came up to show he didn't mean any harm, deftly holding crystalline to his side, muzzle inches from the ground. "Whoa, whoa, whoa, hey, don't do that! Don't do that!" He didn't blame them for confusing the gesture for him surrendering. One of the officers turned on a megaphone and more of that odd language spewed to Naruto's ears, tickling at another headache. "Drop your gun and get down on your knees! Hands behind your head! Do it now! Do it now! Shhhhhh, just shut up for a second." Naruto's head rang and begrit his teeth, waving them away and lifting crystalline up, properly supporting the middle and aiming with his one open eye. "1 second!" Kagaya was jogging to him, waving genially and calling his name. "Blue!" Blue's aim was on her. His line of sight, though, was in the general direction of some police officers. They all opened fire. So did Naruto. While their lead bullets didn't reach the underworld on account of the haze of chakra protecting him, Blue plugged all 6 needles in his cartridge into Kagaya's chest, reloaded and added 5 more to their number, reserving the last for the Otsutsuki's Rinna Sharingan eye. She coughed, grinning and showing the blood painting her teeth. Each needle she pulled out by hand, chuckling all the while and horrifying the spectators. When she got to the eye on her temple, the senbon simply evaporated as if it was a mirage. "Ow!" She laughed, hysterical in spite of the dangerous amounts of blood she was losing from the poison needle wounds. "Oh ho ho ow! That actually hurt, you know? Especially hurts when I laugh." She chortled, a dignified laugh if there ever was any, and wincing as she did so. "Not enough to kill me though, 'cause I'm immortal or whatever," she tittered, healing herself in a flash of heavenly chakra but still wheezing from the closing holes in her lungs. "Can I get a hug, Blue? And a kiss too? It'll make all this pain go away." anticoagulants to stop her blood from clotting, and targeted spider venom to break down her chakra network, coming straight from Orochimaru's house of horrors. It wasn't nearly strong enough to stunt her stride, though the agony she was in was visible through her pure amusement. Her gleeful laughter shook those that heard, motioning for the blank-faced Uchiha to come for them to embrace. The police stopped shooting at Blue. "We can still get this whole fiasco behind us, Blue. You and me. We are meant for each other. We are made for each other," she said, covering her mouth and coughing out blood. She cringed at the sight, wiping her hands on her hips. The utter sincerity and emotion in her words were the furthest thing from false, dripping with feelings for her destined. "I still love you." She paused in her careful walk to him, startled. "Honey, why you're bleeding?" Her Byakugan widened at the bloody streams coming from Blue's nose. "Let me dash, ow, let me help." "Stop, Kaguya. Call off your people." He reloaded crystalline, looking at her all the while. The sniper cocked his infamous long-range weapon. "This doesn't have to end like this." He almost sounded pleading. "We can be friends." "No. She sang. Red liquid crawled down the corners of her mouth. "I don't like sharing. Remember?" His jaw hardened and his frown deepened. He shot her again. Bang! She slapped away the poison needle, inadvertently impaling someone else, wordlessly saying that she could have very easily dodged those last 12 projectiles, but allowed them to meet their mark for his sake. "Honey, baby, connections like those, dash, bang bang, are bad for you. I know what I'm talking about." She tilted her head away left and right, letting the needles whiz past her ears. "Trust me, Naruto." This was the first time she used his name since they formally met. She was serious. Blue sealed his weapon and blurred to her. He didn't need a Sharingan to know that she was about to use her Rinne Sharingan. The Blue Uchiha opened his own godly eye, and it bled with the magnitude of the technique he was about to manifest. His left hand reached her mouth and the other covered the eye on her temple, but the jutsu had already been pronounced. Both gods mirrored the other, speaking as one. "Outer path of the godly ones, dimensions collide and merge." One was spoken to combine the realm they were in with the reality of the elemental nations, while the other snappishly undid the first technique and restored sanity, albeit leaving them in the Valley of End instead of at downtown Chicago. The collision, merge and subsequent disentanglement by the underworld of Invincible's universe and Blue's world happened so quickly yet so noticeably it barely left a scar in its aftermath, only startling those that were there at their sudden appearance. Kushina, spitting out a tooth and cleaning her katana on her calf after dispatching an Otsutsuki tag team, was startled by the sharp change in wind. Her purple eyes bugged out and she wailed, horror struck at his position. "Naruto!" The man whose name she called grunted as Kaguya hugged him, circling her hands around till her palms laid on his lower sides, softly resting her cheek on his chest and slowly stabbing him with bones sprouted from her hands. The fatal bones met in the man's stomach and crossed, escaping outside his body from his ribs. Blue exhaled, tired and bleeding more so than ever. His body started turning flaky from the point of entry at his sides, building at a creeping pace over his body. "You're not going to die. You can't die," the goddess whispered, her words oozing love. Their chakra started coming undone, forming violent storms overhead and shattering what was left of Konoha's precious monument. "You'll just be tired for a long while. Scattered thinly across this dimension, but don't worry, I'll gather your essence together until you wake up." Dying for them meant that their physical form and their consciousness would be scattered far and wide to the outer reaches of the present universe, trapped in a state of limbo where they wouldn't know who, what or where they were. As the years went by, these dispersed pieces of himself would come back together until they recombined to make the Blue Uchiha. It was similar for tailed beasts, like how the Kyuubi would reassemble after 9 years, or the Nibi would reform after 2. The number of years to return to a single spot for the 10-tailed beast as well as the embodiment of the underworld was unknown. Kaguya's Byakugan deactivated. The eye on her head didn't close. Kushina powered to stay on the ground, pushing through the skin-searing blizzard of toxic chakra, ignoring the rawness of her skin. They couldn't hear the Uzumaki from the eye of the hurricane. His body was starting to lose its color, sagging into her warm embrace and holding her in return, running a gentle hand through her hair and quietly undoing her ponytail. "I can wait," she promised. "I've waited before and I can keep waiting." She nuzzled her nose into his neck, speaking in a sleepy voice. "By the time you wake up, I'll have breakfast ready." "Thank you?" She looked at him, almost startled. "What did you say?" The Blue Uchiha looked down to her, smiling. "For that breakfast when I wake up, thanks." A smile bloomed on her face, lighting up the heavens and intensifying the chaotic flurry of their chakra. They were losing control of their chakra. It seemed the last thing Blue would do before he faded was help Kagaya rip the cosmos to pieces while in their 10-tailed forms. "See can dash." She peeked at him shyly, closing her Rinna Sharingan eye. "Can I get that kiss now?" He laughed, winded. "If you don't mind? I'm a bit rusty." She murmured, apologetic, blushing at a fresh wave of laughter from the man. She huffed, embarrassed. "Don't laugh!" It wasn't a mocking sound, though. It was warm and deep and carefree and, him. It was like sitting by a fireplace, curled up in her favorite blanket during a whiteout, safely indoors and away from the cold without a care in the world. He hummed with a lowered smile, judging that she had last gotten any kind of action some thousands of millions of millennia ago. A corner as his lips went up. "Me too." "Ha! You're rusty like a bull in a friggin' cow pen," she snorted, bumping her temple on his chest and smirking. "You liar!" "I'm serious!" He joked and she laughed. Her shimmering face wasn't marred by the blood on her face. "Yeah, sure." She wiped her mouth on his shirt and her blush increased. Let's do this." The hand ghosting the back of her neck slipped to her rosy cheeks, rubbing a light thumb on her colored features, encouraging her to crane her head back to meet his eyes. His sky-blue right eye and the left ringed eye of his godhood. She stood on her toes and their lips touched, first as a small peck and then gliding together, seamless and kneading. The lady sighed and closed her eyes, melting into the man she loved. Her defenses lowered. His infernal eye pulsed and he absorbed her, pulling her everything into his Rinna Sharingan. Kagaya leaned away a little and the bones of her hands snapped, letting her rest her palms on his cheeks. Her pale eyes turned up and her halo didn't dim for even a second, glowing with her expression. "Oh, Naruto!" One last time, she kissed him and then she was gone, sucked in by his eye and absorbed into his system, barring her consciousness to a small corner of his mind where the shadowy faces of those he killed while on duty as Konoha's ninjas resided. The man was now by himself inside the epicenter of the storm, impaled by the woman's bones. He grasped for his chakra control and pulled the storm of beastly chakra into his body, separating holy chakra from hellish power, pouring one into the koi fish summoning realm and the other went to the abyss, the crow contract's home. By the time he was done, he was still fading. And everyone was dead. Everything was dead. The tempest didn't only cover the Valley of End or just Fire Country, it enshrouded the world, polluting the atmosphere from the ozone layer to the core of the planet. Gas masks and protective suits did nothing, saved no one. Human corpses withered to the bone, their skin dried and their eyes deflated. This wasn't a merciful, painless death. Kushina's corpse laid close to his feet, her red hair, dirted by grass and mud but managing to be present despite the toxic air eating away at anything and everything, stood out to him. The toxic air turned trees and foliage to ash, deserts to glass, oceans, lakes and ponds evaporated, losing their vitality and killing the water life. Mountains and hills eroded, hot winds blew decay and rot across the globe, felling buildings and sweeping away underground bunkers. Green changed to gray and blue turned to black. Irreversibly and irreparably, the planet could no longer sustain life. Life died. The only person alive sat down with his legs crossed, too weak to stand. The large pool of water spanning between both statues was no more, dried up for being close to the middle of the storm, and so did the statue of Hashirama wither into dust. Still, his blue right eye rippled and shifted into Kagaya's Rinna Sharingan, adding power to his being alongside his left god's eye. It revolved in and around him. He was the crow and koi fish contract. He was Nagato's prophecy. I saw darkness. A sunless, moonless world with a hellish, fire-breathing monster with a blue Sharingan looming over the earth. A shadowy bird sat on his left shoulder and a magnificent fish swam in the pools of his whirling eyes. The end of reality. Naruto shook his head, refusing to bow his head to that man's words. I can do something. Blue snapped his teeth and clapping his hands together, beginning the first of a few almighty techniques. Rebirth of the God Tree. Naruto's skin hardened, becoming something akin to the demonic statue of the outer path, and a tree grew out from around him, rising tall and high till the branches and leaves scraped the outer edges of space. Inside the God Tree, the man sitting with his legs crossed flipped his fingers to another seal, pronouncing his will over the multiverse. Nativity of the God Tree. The roots of his God Tree both dug deeper into the earth, physically holding the planet together, and others rose out and gently wrapped around the corpses of every person on the planet. The dead bodies of Jinchuriki. The desert nomads that used to be the Saikata clan. Yakuza of Zayuki. People of AIM. His contacts and connections. Orochimaru, who died with her arms widely circling Itachi, Shursui, Izumi and Sasuke, hiding out from the deadly smog in the quarantine zone of her abandoned lab in the Forest of Death. Kushina. Wherever they were and whatever the doing, the gods' roots found them. Essentially coiling around the world, the roots of Naruto's God Tree rose up and encased the bodies in wooden frames that respectfully matches their forms, deftly holding them upright a few inches from the ground. He flowed rejuvenating chakra to heal them and restore their minds and bodies. However they were before the Otsutsuki invasion, he gave that exact amount of vitality to them. Every person that wasn't dead before the coming of the Astral Clan, he rolled them safely into his tree roots and breathed healing to their bodies, not yet returning life into their lungs. This action would have loosened up the structure of the planet, but he duly held the world together with his burrowing God Tree roots and his omnipotent ownership of gravity. Next he encased the planet in a protective sphere and the Blue Uchiha gave a tremendous inhale, sucking the poisonous air into the bluish-green leaves of his great tree and internally cycled around the harmful air, releasing magnificent freshness across the globe along with a bellowing exhale. Color came back to the desolate wasteland. Trees, bushes and roots found the will to grow again, oceans, lakes and ponds also cleared of the blood and godly chakra once polluting them. The sun's rays finally broke through the clouds, shining on the earth. Animals that died directly as a result of his and Kagaya's unstable chakra storm came back to life, bounding about their homes like before. Chibaku Tensei. An island on the opposite side of the planet rose up from the water and smoothed over, becoming spherical and careening into space, halting before it could escape into the void of space and sticking to the planet's orbit. Blue wilted, bone-tired from the reconstruction of the planet, and the God Tree lost a few leaves as it mirrored the man's exhausted self. The rabid goddess's bones sapped at his willpower, lulling him to sleep with the creeping decay spreading about his body. It was like parts of his body at a time were falling asleep and he couldn't wake them up. His lower torso were gone and his shoulders were losing feeling. Grunting, he fixed his hands together into a seal in front of his gut, exclaiming his final jutsu. Pure world resurrection! Silence. Stillness. Nothing moved, not even the recently resurrected animals or the newly cleaned air. Then people of the planet gave a collective gasp as life and warmth rushed through them like a rushing wind, writhing and struggling inside the tree root pods with an instinctive will to escape imprisonment. Blue lowered his tree roots to the ground and weakened them, so much so that a wild push from the person inside and they would crumble. The people forgot any quarrel they had and nations ended their disputes, helping others out from Blue's pods and fetching them water, wondering how and why they were alive. In the case of Jinchuriki, they came back without their tailed beasts. All 9 beasts were absorbed into the God Tree, and thus the Blue Uchiha. Buildings across the continent, though, were some things he couldn't restore, but the people weren't focusing on that. The full minute of them either ascending to heaven or descending to hell was completely wiped from their minds, even recollection of their demise, only remembering that they were under attack. Some tree root cases didn't weaken, instead hardening to a material unlike a mix of adamantium, titanium, steel and lead. Those inside didn't wake up. They were Otsutsuki corpses. Those bodies that were left behind while the majority of the forces fled back home. These dead bodies were the exception. They were not brought back to life. No one knew this, but the Otsutsuki would be slowly sapped of their chakra, personalities and identities, turning into deathly loyal beings Naruto called his white setsu. His white setsu would wake up long before their master. The living looked to those pods warily, and they rightly respected the tree roots not to try to break them open. Whatever happened to them, the roots saved them. Years later, buildings were raised around these root pods, whether in Kumo, Iron Country, Konoha or Hidden Star, becoming tourist attractions and the center of conspiracy theories as to what exactly they were. They were highly guarded and preserved monuments of the day the world almost folded into itself. By the time villages and countries gathered themselves together to send out search parties to find their missing and investigative teams to understand the existence of the massive tree that could be seen all over the continent, it had already been warded off. A blaring absence was noticed. This time, Blue told his friends and family where he was, using a crow to direct them to the place that used to be the Valley of End. Next to come was an event called the Migration. The Uchiha clan relocated from Konoha in all their entirety, and made their home around the god tree, carving a small area of fire country for themselves. They raised mighty fences, giant gates and dedicated gatekeepers to ensure their privacy, doing so with the help of those closest to the blue-eyed Uchiha. The infamy of Orochimaru the snake sage helped keep curious prodding at their walls at bay. Blue's mother suggested Itachi authorize her son's iron accountant to release the inventor's blueprints to the occupants of the village hidden under the blue tree, keeping these blueprints a well-kept secret from outsiders. Itachi, the person willed all Blue had and owned, did not have any issues with his grandmother's advice. Attempts were made to steal these secret invention schematics, and all failed. A flourishing civilization grew from that quaint settlement, expanding outwards several miles to accommodate this rapid development and growth, daring the Fire Daimyo and Konoha to say otherwise. Only a few special cases were allowed inside to live around the Sharingan clan's most powerful person. A temple of marble and metal was constructed, not in worship but to reverence of that man that returned normalcy to their reality. Offerings and prayers were left at the foot of the god tree, sending their love to the man that embodied all of existence. Long before any of that, Naruto, Blue, Uchiha mumbled with a quiet laugh. "Prophecy, my ass," he hummed, screwing his lips to the side. His spirits lowered at Kushina's tears watering the foot of his tree. "Kagaya, I know you're there, and I know you're listening." The man spoke to himself in a raspy murmur, feeling his Rinna Sharingan eyes dim and his eyelids lower. "Even if it takes me all of time, I won't let you escape." Rather than disperse across the galaxy, the Blue Uchiha defied the expectations of his two different Rinna Sharingan. Sitting cross-legged and hands firmly fixed in the ram's seal, his head slumped forward and his body turned to stone. Lingering at the back of his mind and locked in a state of limbo, Kagaya smiled. Epilogue. 18 years later. 5:45 a.m. Beep 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 beep. A hand snaked out from underneath the blankets and slapped the top of the bedside drawer, grumbling and slapping it again, then once more before the person finally brought their hand down on the alarm clock, rising up and sitting against the headboard. Orochimaru blinked slowly, sleepily, one eyelid opening and shutting faster than the other, as she blearily reoriented herself with her home of 18 years. Even though this body had at least 200 more years before it could expire, a good night's sleep was a luxury the legendary Sannin wasn't so keen on escaping. The lady's room was conservative and somewhat plain, not doing her long-standing wealth or her legendary status any justice. The blinds flew up and soft orange-yellow light poured, adding light to bare-toned wallpapers and deep red carpeting. She had a tall, mahogany wardrobe on one side of the room, the same side as an underwear drawer. Cool air-conditioned air hummed around her home, seeping to her room and gliding about her moderate-sized bed. It could comfortably accommodate 3 people, though not for a while. Most of her furniture was from Hidden Chill, her old base of operations before she packed everything in that village and relocated here. Everyone from that village, the IWA orphans her son had rescued and refugees of the Third War, came with her and made their homes around the God Tree, adding to the expanding landscape of the developing hidden village. She yawned widely, stretching her arms high and wide, smacking her lips at the nice click of her lower back. The golden-eyed woman threw off her blanket and swung her legs down, wiggling her toes on the carpet and ruffling her frizzy, dark locks. She hadn't really changed skin since all those years ago, using that dark-skinned IWA Explosion Corps captain she hijacked during the festival at Hidden Salt, moments before her son killed Jiraiya. To commemorate her son's sacrifice, she drew further away from criminal acts, like associating with the Iron Yakuza by working part-time as a mob doctor, and though she hadn't done questionably moral experimentations on a living or formerly living beings since when Blue was 8, she didn't feel that she should halt her scientific research. Her scientific breakthroughs were beneficial for human survival, and the people of the village, not to talk of the world, acknowledged her for her hard work. The woman tiredly slinked to the bathroom, tugging her favorite silvery yellow pajamas over her head and tossing it into the laundry bin in the bathroom, nudging the door shut and passing her shirtless reflection as she made her way to the bath. She tied a towel over herself and pulled off her pants, throwing that over her shoulder and leaning into the sink. She found her toothbrush, spilled some toothpaste on it and ran it under a tap, brushing her pristine white teeth, taking extra care with her fangs. When she was done with that, she gurgled some mouthwash and rinsed her mouth, checking her teeth in the mirror. 10 minutes later, she left the bathroom and went back to her room to get changed. The radio on her alarm clock switched itself on at 6 a.m. on the dot, and the host of the morning radio show spoke in a voice much too excited for that hour. "Good morning, Blue Tree," Orochimaru grunted. "It's another wonderful day in our wonderful home, and what better way to start the day than with ya boy, Ostrich." Random bird sounds trilled: eagles, chickens, ducks and swallows dash, accompanied by party horns. This brought a scoff and a small smile to the Sanin's expression, as she picked up a lab coat and slung it on her forearm. Her clothing choice was somewhat different from years ago, a short-sleeved forest green robe that fell to her upper calves, opening at the front by a slit from her collar to her navel that showed her modest long-sleeved gray shirt. A pair of equally gray pants peeked out from the end of the dress, coming down above her ankles and complementing a pair of low-heeled ninja sandals. She wrapped bandages around her hands and, unknown to a few people, she did so as well for her abdomen, still sore from her prolonged battles with the Otsutsuki clan. Shedding her skin rejuvenated her body, and yet still some injuries couldn't so easily be healed. These particular injuries were taking their sweet time healing, and it bothered her. Making her way down the stairs, the speakers in her living room hummed, connecting with the radio and letting the radio show host's voice follow her to the kitchen. "We are nearing the end of summer break, so it's getting cooler and the wind's blowing harder. Don't forget to put on some warm clothes and carry an umbrella with you, because we're expecting a light shower around midday." The lady of the house took note. "Before I warm up your morning with a glorious lineup of music, I've got a special request here from the world's most adorable kids." He pressed a button and a voicemail from the previous evening started. The children were young, maybe 4 or 5. The scientist stilled for a moment, as she recognized the first kid speaking loudly, or maybe he was holding the phone at his mouth. "Hello? Good evening, Ostrich. My name's Ikamaru." His siblings and cousins introduced themselves as well. "Constantine. Hibisora. Junior. Taiga. Mimiko. Erasure. Kirai. Kun. Crow. Kagaya." Sasuke's quadruplets were last. "And we want to wish our grandma a happy birthday." "Happy birthday, Granny Orochi," said woman smiled, lowering her face and closing her eyes, chuckling fondly at the chorus of kids' voices screaming into the phone. "Happy birthday, Grandma." Some adults chortled in the background of the voicemail, and Orochimaru could pick out each and every one from the timbre of their laugh, shaking her head softly and continuing her trek to the kitchen, enjoying the nice pang of her heart. "We love you, Grandma." "I love you too, babies." She couldn't help but respond, refusing to feel ashamed for talking when no one could hear her. They were sweet kids. As Grandpa, or Grandma, was what the children of the family called those older than their parents, meaning Kushina, Yugao and Blue were also their grandparents. Orochimaru made it a point to stand out. Like she always wanted if Blue were to have kids, she spoiled those children. Oh, she spoiled them. Heaven only knows why they weren't rotten. Well, isn't that the cutest thing you've ever heard? Ostrich cooed in spite of himself, sighing forlornly. Anyway, I want to add my voice and wish Lady Orochimaru the happiest, brightest, and most amazing birthday, and also that each coming birthday be better than the last. Happy birthday, ma'am! Orochimaru decided against breakfast, and jogged back upstairs to her study, going straight to the wall dedicated entirely to a small fraction of her library. She unconsciously nodded to Ostrich's birthday wishes for her, pulling out a few books written by the obscure ancestors of the Yamanaka clan, stolen by yours truly some decades ago during the chaos of the Third War. The stack of books increased to 7, and she sealed them away for later reference. Meanwhile, Ostrich kept talking. Fun fact about Lady Orochimaru, she's still single and I personally think she's a catch. She rolled her eyes, exiting her study. My advice though is that unless you're a solid double S rank with a friggin' death wish, do not come at her for a relationship. The stories I've heard, dead suitors littering the streets of Konoha, and Kumo, and Snow, and Waterfall. He cleared his throat, shaking off a shiver and in turn making a ghost of a smirk flick up on the dark-skinned Sanin's lips. Anyone interested in hearing those stories? I'll try and invite her to the studio. I hear she's a fan. She might agree. Fingers crossed. She would definitely agree to telling some of those gruesome stories on Ostrich's radio show, if only to entertain herself at the village's reaction. As Ostrich began mixing songs, she left through the front door. The radio turned off automatically as she snapped the lock shut, testing the doorknob and tucking her house key into a pocket. Then she thought of her grandkids and their army of children. Ikimaru, Constantine and Hibisora were Itachis, and he had them with Isaribi, except Hibisora, who they adopted from a remote village in water country. Kan and Hibisora were 4 while Ikimaru was 6, the oldest of their ragtag group of kids. Isaribi showered them with so much love and affection, Itachi had to work double time to get them to so much as look in his direction, but they were his world and he loved them. Junior and Taiga were Izumi's, naming her first daughter after herself because the girl had the brazen audacity to look more like her father than her mother, and her second daughter's name was inspired from a popular cartoon her husband enjoyed as a child. The man unfortunate enough to fall in love with her was a puppet master from Suna, the Godame Kazekage's older brother for that matter. Kankuro and Izumi enjoyed their playful bickering. She would rib him into flushing red and he would bite back with a harmlessly scathing retort. It was fun watching them. Shursui adopted Mimiko from Suna, and later on Arisha from Wave Country, advised so by his best friends to stop him from jumping from boyfriend to boyfriend. The Uchiha speedster wasn't one for relationships, but he was all for raising children, oddly enough. It was a risky move on Itachi, Izumi and Sasuke's part, but those 3 knew Shursui too well that they could pinpoint exactly how to make their friend grow up. A single person not willing to commit skipping over getting a pet and adopting 2 children was, admittedly, irresponsible, though it worked out excellently. Shursui was an amazing father, and though he still went on dates from time to time, it didn't end with him naked and hungover in a sketchy stranger's bed. Her mind wandered to Sasuke and his unlucky plight, unable to hide her tickled smile as she waved to her neighbors, bowing ever so slightly in appreciation for their kind birthday wishes. The Sanin's bright yellow eyes might have been looking up the street at the giant tree some miles from her position, evergreen leaves and widely encompassing with its branches, though she lamented at the hilarity of Sasuke's situation. That man had a one-off fling with a Haruno girl 5 years back in a party at Sayuki, while both were out on a mission for their respective villages, and 1 month later she rampaged against Blue Tree's southern gates, the one bordering Konoha, bellowing for Sasuke to drag himself out and take what he had coming. Apparently, one of the condoms broke that heated night at the Elder God Hotel and Casino, and even though the pink-haired girl assured Sasuke she was using a strong contraceptive seal plus a reliable morning-after jutsu and birth control pill combination, mainstay techniques for females on the field and a backup if the condoms didn't work properly. Sasuke even checked with his Sharingan and confirmed her words were true, finding the B-rank seal on her lower abdomen, and the fact that she was a well-known medic was another big plus. In the heat of the moment, they kept going without condoms. Orochimaru snickered, amused by the vague similarities between how she got pregnant for Naruto, although hers was that her son's father forgot his wallet at party and didn't want to head back, keeping her waiting. The Sannin in turn had forgotten to set up protection for herself, drunk and dazed as she was. Sasuke's swimmers bypassed everything. Thus the quadruplets. She bound up a building, pursing her lips to stifle a giggle. Leaping from roof to roof and gesturing briefly to the police officers patrolling the early morning streets, noticing her fleeting figure and greeting her. Their big family didn't let the tired father any moment to rest. As a medic and a mother, Orochimaru respected Sakura Haruno, but as a person the Sannin detested the pinkette with every fiber of her being, even though Sasuke had been able to smooth things over with the clan council. Being the Uchiha clan head and leader of Blue Tree, Sakura refused to step foot in the illustrious village. Her reason? Because Orochimaru, Konoha's most wanted ninja and the mother of the Blue Uchiha, the man that not just betrayed his village but also murdered the Yondaime Hokage in cold blood, was also living in the village. That was the deal breaker, on both sides for that matter. Sakura was at liberty to believe whatever she wanted, and at the same time Sasuke was obliged to rule his village how he saw fit. Blue Tree and Konoha were constantly butting heads on several issues, the biggest being that the relatively newer village should submit the Snake Sannin to Hidden Leaf for judgment on her and her son's crimes. That wasn't ever going to happen, and although Orochimaru had been gallivanting outside Blue Tree, sometimes on errands and other times for leisure, no person dared touch her, for the collective might of Blue Tree would crash down on the aggressor. The famed grandmother needn't lift a finger. After some intercession from Itachi and Asuma Sarutobi, Godaime Hokage, both parties agreed that the parents could split custody of their children, 6 months for Sasuke and the remaining 6 for Sakura. For the children's birthdays, they would go to any neutral place to celebrate. Their father also freely came and left Konoha to see his children, even as it was Sakura's 6 months to have the kids, staying some nights at Sakura's place on her living room couch. It was the pink medic's loss that she wouldn't enter Blue Tree during Sasuke's 6 months. Schooling was another issue entirely for the parents. Sasuke wanted to be a father to his kids, and though he didn't once enjoy handing the 4 over to the Konoha medic he ensured to write and call them every week. Orochimaru dropped down to an average-sized one-story building, idly glancing up at the sign neatly hanging at top. Crystalline Pharmacy and Laboratory. The street her lab was on was beginning to wake up. Food kiosks were setting up shop around the corner, the shops close by were opening their doors, and the street cleaners were rounding up their work, packing up and heading back to the administrative tower. Orochimaru had gone legit, if not for her then for the sake of her extended family. A lot had happened since 18 years ago. Since Blue's God Tree grew out from what used to be the Valley of End. The village hidden under the Blue Tree was spread just about as large as Konoha, taking for themselves a quarter of Fire Country's land mass and soundlessly daring the Fire Daimyo to call foul. They weren't separating themselves from the country, so for that the Daimyo breathed a sigh of relief. It was mainly populated by the Uchiha clan, now 3 times their number from when they were in Konoha Dash, the partners of these Uchiha men and women, and also provided sanctuary for people in the Blue Network. Anyone on the Blue Network that wanted to set down roots around the God Tree was welcome to come, and their presence in Naruto's coveted map of friends and acquaintances could be confirmed by Blue's letters to them the day before Minato killed him at Wave, where he informed them that he was trusting them to look after his nephew. Many villages were rightly angered at the move to Blue Tree, losing some of their best shinobi in the coming years. For the most part the Uchiha Council ignored their threats, continuing their lives as normal and making sure the people didn't worry for their livelihood inside Blue Tree. To placate their neighbors against taking an offensive stance against the growing power that was their village, Blue Tree sent merchants to establish businesses, where goods made in the village could be sold outside. This stilled any aggression for the long term because the products made in the Uchiha-populated village were unarguably high quality. Poising for invasion to steal these resources was an option they couldn't take. The barriers and military expertise of the village was an impossible obstacle to overcome. The snake sage wore her lab coat, and the double doors of the pharmacy slid open on their own as they sensed her approach, shutting behind her with a soft swish. Inside, Kabuto was accounting for the drugs on the shelves, looking down at a clipboard to see if they were where they were supposed to be and also seeing that anything a year to expiry was put aside. Public health and safety was the lab's priority. And it was this reliable reputation that the General Hospital and the village's one clinic partnered up with them. Drug supplies and medical technologies were the things purchased from them. Never did the snake-eyed woman imagine she could turn her life around so drastically, but here she was. And here she thought her son was the only person in the whole world that could bring the best out of her. Kabuto jerked at her master's appearance, blushing faintly when the pale lady just smiled at her from the closed double doors. The Sanin's protégé stood up straight and bowed. "Good morning, Lady Orochimaru." Then she beamed. "Happy birthday." Orochimaru's features shone. "Thank you, Kabuto. How was your night? Did you sleep okay?" "I slept well. The screws in my back are gone now, so I don't need those meds anymore." Her mistress's expression dimmed at the memory. Kenshiki had snapped her student's spine moments before Orochimaru's arrival. And though her regeneration was able to fix her up, it was a long and painful journey of rehabilitation and recuperation. To aid her recovery, she underwent spinal surgery to support her internal healing. Depression and feelings of worthlessness while the world was falling apart set in after surgery, especially on finding out that the person she adored was now a tree, and Kabuto's master took it upon herself to cheer her student up. Their small family came together to distract the medic of her agonizing plight. Making her assistant manager of crystalline helped as well. Kabuto had grown up and matured over time. Her clothes had changed. Gone was the all-black, tight bodysuit. Now the bespectacled medic wore a beige battle kimono that reached her knees, gray tights, black sandals and a blue sash on her hips. She wasn't as slender as when she was younger, filling out a bit more now 18 years later. But Kabuto Yakushi was a very beautiful woman. Though her love for the Blue Uchiha didn't fade, not even a little, she was a stellar medic and a determined kunoichi. Orochimaru couldn't possibly be any prouder. She came in for a hug and her student laughed awkwardly, circling her arms around her mistress. They parted and Kabuto bowed again, exuding unending gratitude to the older woman. "Finish up with this and come to the back. I'm going to order for some breakfast." Orochimaru walked around the counter, and stopped for a minute. "What do you want?" Maybe some waffles, eggs sunny side up dash, lemon tea and a spoonful of honey." The Sannin bobbed her head, looking to the ceiling and murmuring the order told to her by her young apprentice. "Thanks." Orochimaru made the call from the landline in a laboratory to a local bed and breakfast that offered delivery services around the village, first listing out Kabuto's order, and then providing her own. When she was done, she went to work studying chemical compounds and preparing drugs for transport either to the hospital or to the clinic. Their laboratory also offered research services, where diseases, ailments and unknown maladies were looked into and cures were worked on. This was only the case if the hospital's lab and the experts there were having trouble isolating the problem, calling for the help of the legendary scientist. The disease she was examining now was a cross between chickenpox and measles that made the sufferer hallucinate and vomit blood. It wasn't widespread, detected in small numbers in Kiri some days ago, but Sasuke and the council personally requested Orochimaru study the infection to prevent a spread in the village, seeing as Kiri was one of the many places they regularly associated with. The things the dark-skinned lady and her protégé could cross out was that it wasn't airborne or waterborne. Now she was looking into physical contact, fluid exchange and, to a lesser extent, Hoshi pink meteorite radiation. If anyone could get the job done, it was Granny Orochimaru. The temptation to ask Tsunade for help was non-existent. Orochimaru was nearing a cause and cure for this problem. She didn't expect that day to be particularly different from others, regardless of it being her birthday. Her schedule, though specially altered for that day, reflected some changes. Sign off a batch of deliveries to the hospital and another one to the clinic in a few hours, write and submit a report on her current findings concerning the mystery pox, go on a midday walk with her assistant, lunch with Kushina and Yugao. People watching at the front counter of her pharmacy, join Itachi and Kankuro in picking up the pack of kids from preschool. This one happened in uneven rotations depending on their schedules, though the doting grandmother made sure to do this at least twice a week. Step away for a moment to phone Yujito, who was staying in Kumo, come back and pick up a few baking tips from Isaribi, try and fail to pry the overly clingy Hibisora off her back. Have a dinner party to celebrate her birthday, and to end the day she often went to the village shrine to speak to her son. Tell him how their family was faring and that she missed him dearly. She wanted Blue to know that she loved him. Always. Some time later. Blue Tree Temple. Center of hidden Blue Tree. Blue Tree Village was a peculiar place. Whether or not it was a true hidden village was constantly up for debate among outsiders, seeing the place more as a bigger, more urbanized Uchiha clan compound than anything else. The laws governing the village were Uchiha in nature, and anyone staying inside the village strictly had to abide by them or else face punishment. Itachi entered the smooth marble temple dedicated to the Blue Uchiha. The interior had a vaulted ceiling lit up by soft glowing light bulbs and almost nothing else if not for the base of the tree rooted at the head of the temple. The base of the tree itself was merely a quarter of the whole lower region, but it was considered special by the shrine attendants because the crow that led the clan to the god tree swiped a claw there. The place wasn't solely made for the blue marksman. Memorial stones for late, great Uchiha were fixed around the bigger shrine dedicated to Naruto. Graves and gravestones were carefully moved to a plot of land at the outskirts of the village where a tree root pod was located. The graveyard was a sacred place, treated as an extension of the temple and attended to accordingly. Non-Uchiha indigenes could be buried there too. Blue Tree was a place where everyone enjoyed the same things and were limited by the same laws without favor for bloodline or social status. Both the graveyard and the temple were places often visited. The Genjutsu master wanted to beat the long line into the temple, so he arrived at the crack of dawn, as per his usual morning habit, to offer his greetings to his uncle. He had Blue's Hunter Ninja mask clipped to the right side of his hip, wearing a dark short-sleeved shirt, a long-sleeved mesh armor underneath that shirt and black pants with Shinobi sandals. Over his torso was a red and black jounin vest, bearing the Uchiha fan at the back. In Itachi's left hand was a hideite that had the Uchiha fan stamped on the metal plate. He didn't have any of his standard weapons on his person. The lines under his eyes deepened, staring at the tree from the shrine's entrance, then he chuckled as three small bodies collided into his legs. He didn't make them come with him on his morning routine. They woke up, bathed and scampered after their father every day before and after preschool. Their bedtime was at 8, and yet it still baffled their father how they could be up and ready for the day at 6, when at that time their parents were struggling to keep their eyes open. They had too much energy for kids their age. Itachi and Isaribi were contemplating canceling sugar from their house completely, or at the very least switching from sugar to honey. It was real debate at home. Ikemaru, Constantine and Hibisora ran ahead of their mother, who was slowly treading in with a tin-foil wrapped tray of pastries, an incense stick and some flowers, smiling slightly at her children mobbing their father. The oldest, Ikemaru, and the middle child, Constantine, were identical to their father in all but the deep lines under Itachi's eyes. Jet black hair and light brown eyes, the boy and girl lugged their red-tinted school backpacks while wearing normal mufti. The youngest by 8 months from Constantine's birthday, Hibisora, also had a school bag, and he was the one that had his mother's features, adopted as he was. He took after his mother due to their backgrounds. Hibisora had green-red scales over his body not unlike a snake, covering his arms to his shoulders, neck to under his chin, stomach and from his knees to his toes, sporting sharp black nails his parents regularly had to file down to prevent calamitous injury. His snake-like eyes were a gleaming shade of copper yellow with a hypnotic blend of purple and black serving as what were meant to be the whites of his eyes. The snake child's hair was soft brown, straight, and tickling the nape of his neck as the front fringed over his temple. He looked nothing like his family, and still the resemblance with his mother was uncanny, the similarities being the circumstances around his birth. Ichiraku had been on a personal trip somewhere in water country, taking time for herself while her family were staying in Kiri, when she came upon a camp isolated from a village. In that poor camp and inside a tattered tent was the recently deceased body of a skinny woman with the lower torso of a snake, dearly hugging a crying 1-year-old baby. There were some words written on the ground of the tent by the dead mother. Hibisora. Love our child. The fish woman buried the snake woman respectfully and took the child back to the village, soon learning how much they despised both the dead lady and her baby. People of that village saw their existence as bad omens, and the sheer disgust mixed with morbid fear wasn't lost on Ichiraku. Exactly how the people in Land of the Sea saw Ichiraku. Staying at the remote camp for 2 more days, for the woman couldn't stand the sight of that village, Ichiraku waited for the person the dead mother hoped would come for their child, the person called Hibisora, but that person never came. Itachi was all for bringing the new addition into their home, and the couple were raising their child normally, in spite of his looks. Blue Tree didn't mind. The boy was an honorary Uchiha. What was there to be bothered about? Orochimaru swore she didn't have a hand in both the dead mother and her grandson's reptilian affliction. Said Snakeboy clambered up his father's shoulders, coiling his arms and legs around the man's neck and middle like a constrictor, though that action bore no malice or ill intent. His father didn't bat an eye, exaggeratedly staggering when his 2 other children attached themselves to his legs. Their laughter brought a warmer smile to Ichiraku's face. The couple met on a blind date. Shursui's then boyfriend had a friend of a friend of a friend that knew a single lady that newly moved to the fire capital, and the date was set up. Itachi was as cool as ever, charming despite his stoic front, but the observant woman could see right through the Uchiha man, spotting the small beads of sweat on his brow, his untied right shoelace, the quick fumble for his wallet after dinner, not sure if it was rude of him to pay for the whole thing. It was funny. The 2 of them weren't exactly skilled when it came to dating, but it was amusing watching the man stumble through a conversation, something anyone other than her wouldn't have noticed. Her secret smile eased the man's nerves. A handful of months into their relationship, they found out how they were connected together through the Blue Uchiha. Her husband winked, managing to pick his 3 children up in his arms and whirl around to face her, and she waggled her eyebrows right back at him. Itachi laughed. Making a home with her was the best decision he ever made. She didn't have a problem with his sparing facial expressions, and he could tolerate her terrible jokes. Match made in heaven. It was impossible imagining a world without each other. Reflecting on their village, she gently dropped offerings to the Blue Uchiha at the shrine, lit the incense, and clapped her hands together, bowing in respect. Itachi ushered the children before the shrine and joined her, tilting his head down. The kids mirrored their parents. They were grateful for Blue Tree. The being inside the god tree had not ordered for the village to be made around him. He was still the one that brought them all together, Uchiha and non-Uchiha. It was a place built on the dreams and drawings of the Naruto, Blue Uchiha. Even though Blue was an inventor that focused on etching out images of machineries and equipment to make day-to-day life convenient for the average person, Itachi also found several files and folders among the throng of uninvented blueprints that detailed building constructions, dated from when the man's blue uncle was about 10 years old. Naruto, as a way to distract himself between missions during the Third War, made imaginary citywide plans. They weren't ever meant to see the light of day, juvenile as they were, but Naruto took those drawings very seriously. Blue wasn't much for leadership, but he was perfectly fine being a builder. His clan didn't strictly abide by those blueprints, following only logical building placements, and raising houses for their people to live in. For the most part, the clan had been making secretive plans to part ways from Konoha since Hashirama Senju was appointed Hokage. All they had to do was dust off old plans and merge them with Blue's. The earth within a 500 square kilometer radius of the tree was rich in nutrients, blessing everything planted to not just grow relatively quicker than normal, but also bountifully as well. The farms of the village saw regular harvest, adding more and more surplus crops to the dozens of storage houses safely nestled about the village. At a point, there was a declaration from the administrative tower for farmers to reduce how much they planted, at least for a little while until they found a way to deplete their stores. This crop surplus in the stores brought about a demand for industries and specializations they never knew would be in dire need of, so as to make proper use of those stored products. Cloth/shoemaking businesses and lumberjacks were among them. Traveling merchants were called on in newspapers, radio stations and TV networks by the leader of the village to help export goods from Blue Tree, whether as raw materials or finished products, opening the floodgates for demand from countries and a steady stream of profit. These traders would be given the best possible security and hefty incentives to keep them satisfied. Blue Tree was self-sufficient. They had large food stores, an abundance of ninjas, a sprawling civilian population, bearable weather in comparison to other places, and limitless innovative, creative and imaginative people willing to work hard for their home. The latter point could have resulted from the Uchiha's mastery of genjutsu. The only resources Blue Tree didn't have were precious metals and crude oil, so for the former they established an agreement with the trading village of Hidden Mountain, one of the only villages to recognize their autonomy, and were not bothered by their rise, buying gold and silver in exchange for discounted goods like clothes and food. In the case of oil, the clan leadership immediately moved for Blue's solar panels to be constructed, adopting solar energy throughout the village. Solar battery cells stored the sun's rays, carrying them through nights and cloudy weeks. They really only had to follow the inventor's blueprints to the letter. At the beginning, things were tough. It was a time where the clan mourned, marking their new home and defending outside prodding. They first had to live in tents, each family in their own, opening their doors to orphans and elders that were too worn to survive alone. It was a time the Uchiha way shone. Live within your means. Leave no one behind. The arrival of the Snake Sannin and all of Hidden Chill as well as Itachi supporting the clan with his uncle's immeasurable billions boosted their morale, moving out of tents and into wooden houses, then to advancing to concrete constructs. Clan leadership and leadership of the village was raised in a council meeting, attended also by Blue's mother, the 4 Uchiha friends and Yugao. Kushina politely declined the invitation. She didn't want to impose. Being from Fugaku's lineage and acknowledging his maturity, the clan council came to Itachi to take up the role of clan head. This was about the same time they were settling down and raising walls around their new home. Itachi refused, stating that he wasn't interested in being clan head, receding into an advisory function alongside his grandmother, Orochimaru of the Sannin, and his aunt Yugao Yuzuki. Sasuke was next in line, though he was too young at that time, being 4 years old then. The council ruled the village until Sasuke was old enough and skilled enough to be recognized by the whole clan. 10 years into Blue Tree's creation and finding their feet in the world, Sasuke accepted the role of leader and clan head, becoming the youngest of either for decades to come at 14 years old. When he was sure everyone in the village had a stable roof over their heads and a dependable supply of food to each table, Sasuke commissioned for the administrative tower to be built. Though the shade of the god tree only covered the shrine, where the tree itself was tended to by shrine attendants and the prayers of the people were left for a hopeful answer, its shade also easily encompassed the 10-story administrative tower where the leader and his council oversaw the daily lives of the people. The tree's branches didn't shade the whole village, but its significance was no less important. Not for a second did anyone think Naruto, Blue Uchiha, was dead. Not any adult, and not any child. And this time there was definitive, unflinching proof that Naruto was alive. In place of hope and loyal speculation, there were actual facts. Chakra sensors could feel Naruto's presence inside the god tree, pulsing in a soft symphony of life and nature. Those permitted to study the tree found that the thrum of chakra flowing within and ebbing in gentle waves from it resembled that of a resting borderline sleeping-tailed beast, albeit the chakra barely seeping outwards wasn't poisonous. Dreaming. Studies of the tree's chakra signature determined for a fact that the being inside was dreaming. The specifics of the dreams were uncertain, though the certainty was that Blue wasn't having a nightmare. Itachi's pocket chimed. He fished out his phone, seeing that it was a message from his brother. Brown knitted and curious why Sasuke was texting him so early in the morning. He swiped his index finger over the sensor at the back of his phone and opened the new message. Mom's sick. Ichiraku noticed her husband's invisible frown, burrowed under his controlled expression, and she asked, pulling her only daughter back from climbing a shrine attendant and carefully eyeing Ikimaru as the boy visited the other Uchiha shrines, guided by another attendant. What's wrong? The man showed her the message and her lips screwed to the side, understanding her man's sudden withdrawn emotions. He didn't react to Hibisora wrapping himself around his middle, harmlessly nipping his lethally sharp, poisonous fangs at his father's neck like the vampire demon from a horror movie he mistakenly walked in on that his granny Yugao was watching at her apartment. The man's wife shared a look with her husband, communicating mentally for 10 silent seconds, before she nodded, calling her kids to her. Why don't we visit Yugao and see if she finally fixed her washing machine? The retired swordswoman was going through this thing where she made it a point to do repairs herself, when she didn't know heads or tails of anything but being a sword master, watching instructional videos and jumping headfirst into her broken appliances. Most of the time it ended well, other times she had to beg her unhappy roommate, Kushina, to pitch in for a new machine. Why was she their family's designated handyman? The couple shrugged, chuckling at their telepathic joke. Might as well burn some time watching the famed sword master toss around and dig into a washing machine until the kids had to get to school. Khan and Hibisora's class were graduating preschool to year 1 of 4, whereupon the time they were 8 years old the kids would decide whether to choose a specialization in the ninja arts or a civilian occupation, and as per the yearly tradition of the preschool graduation there would be a short drama held by the graduating class. Constantine was Tree B, and Hibisora's function was to smash a pair of together from backstage. If only he could do that on cue. Ikimaru was in year 2, so he wasn't in the play. Instead, his class was doing a song presentation to start off the graduation ceremony. Their little girl, Constantine, swore to be the best tree a tree could ever be. She was oddly fired up to be a tree. It was weird. Meanwhile, the youngest boy still couldn't hit his mark. Exiting the temple, Constantine looked back to the great tree their village was built around, wondering what her grand-uncle was dreaming. At the same time, Sasuke's house. Sunset District. Southern region of Hidden Blue Tree. A small, 5-year-old girl, gaily tapped her feet on the carpeted floor from her low perch seated in between her father's crossed legs and humming a tuneless song. Her 3 siblings were still fast asleep, scheduled to wake up in 10 minutes and prepare for school. She slept in short, random bursts at a time, barely taking afternoon naps. By the time her siblings were sleeping, she was stubbornly nodding her head as her father piggybacked her. In many ways, she was like her father's older brother, Itachi, when said man was younger and plagued with crippling insecurities. Sasuke put the finishing touches on Crow's 2 braided pigtails, lethargic and helping her off his legs. There we go, princess. All done. Thanks, Daddy. He had just finished bathing her and dressing her up, an easy task when it came to Crow seeing as she was the calmer of the 4 kids. He did so for himself earlier, wearing unassuming dark clothes, a deep brown shirt, black shinobi pants and ninja sandals. He didn't wear a jounin flak jacket often. He was a simple man that didn't flaunt his affluence. For Sasuke, there wasn't a reason to wear your wealth on your sleeve or brag of your power. He let his enemies do that. He, on the other hand, didn't want to. He didn't need to. Like his Uncle Blue, Sasuke Uchiha was perfectly fine being underestimated. Sasuke smiled at his daughter, accepting her kiss on the cheek with a tired nod and unfolded his legs, standing up and stretching. It was amazing how much he would do to make his children happy. Happier than his parents ever made him, and as happily as his Uncle Blue ensured he was. Like braiding hair, he learned it for Crow and Kagaya, his daughters. They enjoyed having their hair braided. And whenever he stayed at Sakura's too, he was subjected to the quadruplets painting his face with their mother's makeup till he was an unrecognizable clown, the stuff of comical nightmares. The man rubbed his eyes and bobbed his head when Crow asked if she could go and wake up the rest. She got a pale, pinkish hair tone and dark eyes. Kagaya's hair was jet black with lime green eyes, Kirai bore Sasuke's unruly jet-black hair and the man's black orbs, while Kun was his mother's son, having her pink hair and her green eyes. The quadruplets were identical in all but behavior. The leader of Blue Tree hummed, ambling to the bathroom to bath his kids. Crow was assertive, taking charge of the four though not the overall leader of the gaggle of kids. Kirai was stubborn, crying himself hoarse if he didn't have his way, pushing and shoving for what he wanted. The oldest of Sasuke's quadruplets cried over everything, literally crying over spilt milk on many occasions. Kun was the shy one, receding to the back of the pack, and still the adults saw the flicker of awareness as he overlooked the other kids like a guardian, or better yet a protector. One time, Kun gave Kirai his ice cream before the other boy could cry up a storm at the museum for his ice cream falling to the ground, quicker than Sakura or Sasuke could react. Kaguya was entitled and bossy, often almost asserting herself over Crow and demanding the attention of everyone around her. She spoke like a noble in training and both parents swore they don't know where she learned it from. The youngest quadruplet, Crow, barked at Kaguya to stop dancing and stand still for their dad to wiggle her into her clothes, and Sasuke scoffed, winking at her in appreciation. Kaguya pouted and raised her hands, slipping on a dress and a pair of shorts. Sasuke would have scolded Kaguya to keep still if he wasn't so damn tired. On top of not having the physical support of the other parent during his half year of raising their kids, his girlfriend of 3 years was having trouble getting the Hokage to accept her resignation in order to permanently move to Blue Tree, and now he got a report that his mother was sick. Most would think that Hanabi Hyuga was going through a rebellious princess phase, dating the leader of the village Konoha as a whole hated and going as far as to meet with Sasuke's family, making her intentions for her Uchiha boyfriend clear as day. 3 years later, and the couple were going strong. Sasuke was actually planning to propose sometime next week. The problem was that her clan and her village were setting up roadblocks to stop her move. The Hyuga clan pulled some expensive strings just so she couldn't get her his own place in Konoha no matter how much money she was willing to pay, forcing her to live in the clan compound, which would explain why Sasuke was sleeping in Sakura's couch instead of at his girlfriend's place. She was at liberty to take missions away from the country, so there was that. Hinata said and did nothing. Asuma, the Godame Hokage, flat out declined her resignation. The Sarutobi's faux hospitality ended with the 4 kids when he realized Blue Tree wouldn't submit, merging with Hidden Leaf in all their might. Rather, the only other hidden village in Fire Country was growing more powerful, more developed, more advanced. Eloping would put the quadruplets in danger and also set off an international incident. Konoha would use that excuse to declare war on Blue Tree. Although Sasuke's village had the manpower, military mastery and technology to stave off an attack, it would be hard keeping away Konoha's allies. In a few years, Blue Tree would have more villages and nations dependent on them. Now though, and in this particular situation, they were stuck. There, Daddy," Kun mumbled, standing on his toes and patting his father's dark locks. Sasuke didn't even realize he had been sitting on his bed in reflective silence, unmindful of the kids jumping on his bed. It seemed little Kun was also watching over him too. That made him smile. Sasuke playfully crossed his eyes and stuck out his tongue, and Kun giggled. He picked the boy up and took his phone from his pocket at the same time it chimed, notifying him of a message. He opened it, and Kun poked his head at the phone as well. It was a morning selfie from Hanabi, taken from the upstairs balcony of her bedroom, sulking in her adorable bed head and disheveled pajamas. Under the picture she wrote, "Missin' you?" The dark bags under his eyes instantly cleared and his tiredness swept out of his body, shining as if he had just shed off all his troubles and worries. Daddy," Kun pat his father's cheek, waking the man up from his blissful daydreams. Answer! Oh, I miss you too. Are you free in an hour? Her answer was swift. Yeah? What are you planning, Uchiha? It's a surprise. I'll be there later. You know I've got these eyes. You literally can't hide anything from me. Is that a dare, Ms. Hyuga? Her reply was a winky emoji, followed closely by an emoji sticking out its tongue, then a gif of a cartoon squirrel doing a funky dance. Sasuke smirked. Challenge accepted. You'd think they were teenagers toying around like this. Daddy? Is that Hanabi? Kagaya asked, tugging on his pants leg. Say hi for me. Okay, calm down. The kids say hi. Her answer landed soon after. Kiss him for me. Tell him I've got presents. He shrugged, relaying only half of that message. She wants me to kiss you guys. A devilish twinkle come to his eyes. As if on cue, Kun began struggling in his arm, wiggling and thrashing in near hysterical hurry to escape his father's arm. But unfortunately for the quiet boy, he was Sasuke's first victim. The other kids shrieked gleefully, fleeing from their father's heat-seeking kisses, stampeding downstairs like they were running for their lives. Kaiouya! They were going to run late for school and Itachi was probably already on the way over for them to head out to see their mom, but damn it if he couldn't help messing with these 4 babies. As he was layering kisses on a joyously squealing Kirai's belly, restraining Crow with a hand and honing his kisses to her face, the doorbell rang. Ding dong! Getting up to answer the door and leaving those 2 children panting, his 2 other kids leaped on him. Kagaya clinged on for dear life with arms around his neck and Kun held Sasuke's left ankle. Oh? Their father hummed, acknowledging how unexpected this ambush was. His body blurred and their positions suddenly changed. Kun was thrown over a shoulder in a fireman carry and Kagaya, dazed at the sharp change, was hefted off the ground under the leader's arm. Kirai and Crow joined in, screaming war cries that reached those standing outside at the front door. But Sasuke's deftly lifted Crow to his other shoulder, while the youngest found himself under his other arm. The 4 blinked. Sasuke smirked. The pair at the door pursed their lips at the hilarity of the position once the clan had opened his door. Hey! The youngest of Fugaku's sons nodded in greeting, all too calm for the 4 children draped over him, tired and winded from their play. Morning! How's it going? Kushina chuckled, collecting the 2 5-year-olds from their dad arms. Morning! She slid past Sasuke with Kagaya and Kirai carried on each of hips, smoothly stepping inside. Sorry I'm late. Some genin needed help finding a lost dog. Sasuke allowed his other kids down, though Crow and Kun stayed glued at his sides. Itachi peered around from the open door, leaning on the frame and scoffing at the shiver that rolled through the familiar redhead. I hate dogs. Probably the effect of living with Yugao the cat lady, the infamous swordswoman that adored cats, but was deathly allergic to them. Uzumaki genes kept age away for the most part, making her face and physique youthfully the same. It was from the few gray lines in her red hair, the paleness of her skin, the sleepless shadows under her eyes and ths subtle sadness of her gleaming purple eyes did the Uchiha brothers see her true age. Her sparse, light makeup didn't hide her age from them. Kushina wore a black battle kimono with golden yellow trimmings, black tights and white sneakers with black laces. She had a slightly oversized navy blue bomber jacket. It had a red Uzumaki on the left chest and a red Uchiha fan on the right. It was unzipped and her long hair was styled into a neat ponytail. I'm sorry for bothering you like this, and so unexpectedly too. He called her at the crack of dawn, long before Crow yawned her way into his bedroom. A squad of his chunin were passing by their mother's abode and informed him, apologetically knocking on his door at 4 in the morning. Kushina shrugged casually. Don't be. As a teacher, it's my job to get kids to school, keep them there and then to make sure they get home safely. It went above and beyond what other teachers did, but for the kids of the family, Kushina couldn't help but favor them. Only a little bit. She half smiled at Sasuke's concerned frown. Seriously, it's fine. I've got this. All right. The redhead Uzumaki wasn't a preschool teacher or even a pre-academy teacher. She was a full-time academy teacher. A cool, stylish teacher, but a teacher nonetheless. Sasuke laughed inside. The last mission she took was 18 years ago, helping build the barriers around the then smaller blue tree. She would have put a hand in expanding that construction if not for caving to Itachi asking her to relax. They haven't had breakfast yet, the father of 4 supplied. He then explained to his former teacher, telling her what she didn't need to stress herself over. Their school bags are packed and their homework's finished. He bowed a little. I really appreciate this, sensei. PSHHH, I said don't worry about it, Sasuke. She repeated, sincerely not minding whatever trouble Sasuke thought he was putting on her. I'll fatten them up before we leave the house. Sasuke became nervous. Sensei dash. I'm joking. I'm joking. She looked around to Itachi and rolled her eyes. Now get going. If they don't eat now, they'll be late for school. Sasuke pressed a kiss to the tops of their heads, doing the same for Kagaya and Kurai, who jumped off their granny Kushina. I'll see you guys later. But Daddy, Kagaya whined. I want to show you my boyfriend. Itachi choked on air and Sasuke's eyes bugged wide open. Boyfriend? His eyes snapped to Kushina, incredulous at her apparent amusement of the situation. What boyfriend? The little girl's answer was a blush and an innocent swoon. Sasuke so red? His eyes turned red too. The teacher giggled. You shouldn't worry, it's probably some boy that gave her his juice box during lunch break, or something like that. Unknown to them, that was exactly what happened. Sasuke needed more convincing. Probably? Maybe. Sensei, I'm serious. Kushina laughed, louder, making her way to the kitchen to make pancakes. The father called out after her. Sensei? Kun patted his father's side, calling for his attention. Sasuke's Sharingan flicked off and he looked down to his son. Uchiha Black met Haruno Green. At that moment, father and son reached an understanding. Sasuke left the house with his brother, at ease for the moment. Somewhere in grass country. Mikoto gathered her white-gray shawl about her and sat down on a tree stump, exhaling as she took her seat and scrunching up her age-lined face. The poor shawl she wore was a customary garb according to Uchiha traditions. It symbolized grieving, repentance, penance. It covered her head, hiding her graying hair that were once lush and shimmering. The shawl hid every part of her body, her hands and feet included, leaving only her pale face, weather-beaten face. Her eyes were closed. At her back was a ramshackle hut, barely big enough for her to stand up fully, and all around was an endless field of grass, as far as the eyes could see and with not a single noise from the nearest human settlement. Rabbits slept at the blind woman's feet. She turned her head to the right, as if looking there but instead facing her ears to the two men standing before her. I have tea, she proposed, about to rise again, not caring how her bones ached. I can make tea. We're fine, Sasuke said. Sit, please. Itachi remained silent, fixing an empty gaze on their mother. Mikoto eased back down on the stump. A hesitant smile twitched to her expression. My boys. Her voice cracked. Sasuke, Itachi dash. What was wrong with you? Itachi questioned, breaking his tense stare. Did you eat something bad? I lied. The woman replied softly, holding back a sob. I'm sorry. I lied. Age and exile couldn't take away her skills in deception. She held out her hands to her two sons. I wanted to hear from my boys again. TCH. The older brother scoffed. Typical. Sasuke didn't break composure, saying, We're in enough trouble coming here. If the council find out no dash. He shook his head. If the village finds out you're not dead. Mikoto's arms steadily fell, weariness dropping her shoulders. Her youngest son didn't need to finish his words. The Chunin that brought the report worked directly under the leader and were sworn to secrecy. Only those in their family knew. Sasuke's words reigned supreme in Blue Tree, without a doubt, though that didn't lessen the people's ire on Mikoto, Blue's disgraced sister. The two brothers had no hand in Mikoto traveling to grass country, or establishing her sanctuary in the deserted grass plains. It was ensuring Konoha knew nothing of her whereabouts those two men oversaw. Their mother wanted nothing to do with Hidden Leaf. Mistaken loyalty to her village instead of her clan brought this punishment down on her. Hatred of her brother was why she was there, a poor, blind, chakraless woman. Mikoto taught her boys to love their clan and live for their clan, one of the only things she ever taught them, and she had broken that because of spite. In all the world she had one brother, and she hated him. Not anymore. Blue gave her a chance to be his sister, confiding in her by telling her of his therapy sessions with Inoichi. He opened his heart to her, and she stepped on it. She made peace with the fact that she could never apologize to Naruto for all she had done, and that never again would she go back to the clan, welcomed in life or otherwise. Her legacy as a proud Uchiha was gone. All she could do was feel sorry for herself. The two boys detested their mother, but they respected her wish to avoid Konoha no matter the cost. Until her death, Mikoto would not speak a word to any person pleasantly affiliated with Konoha. This, though, was the brothers' first time meeting their mother in person in years. When my only company is the wind through the meadow, and the gentleness of these rabbits, I can only wonder why I'm here. The mother whispered. I knew the things I told Minato would turn the clan against me, make me a blood traitor, and I still went and did it. Her sons listened, observing the deep, weary lines etched on the woman's once graceful features. I'm sorry, Sasuke, Itachi, for breaking up our family. What we had with you and Fugaku wasn't a family. Itachi corrected the tired lady, looking down on her without remorse. It was broken from the start. I am sorry. I could have been many things. The woman shifted her shawl, showing them her hands. A wife, a mother, and a sister. And I failed. Her hands receded into her humble clothes. Can I be a grandmother? She can. Can I please meet my grandkids? The two exchanged a look, and Sasuke spoke on their behalf. No. Mikoto wilted. That's not going to happen. Not unless they sought her out themselves. Both fathers wouldn't hide who their Uchiha grandmother was from their kids. Whether they wanted anything to do with her was up to them. Taking that pause to change the subject, fully intending to convince them later, Mikoto said. I went to the market yesterday to work for some money. It took some long, hard searching, but she finally found a business in the market willing to let a frail, blind woman wash their dishes. The nearest market was in a rural village roughly 5 kilometers from where her camp, and she made that walk on her own every day from sunrise to sunset. Regretful memories of her past kept her company. Someone came up to me. He said his name was Zetsu. The pair tensed, recalling that name from a written text recovered from AIM by Orochimaru. The Sannin had used the pandemonium of her son's battle with the Rinnegan god to steal from the knowledge-wealthy library of Hidden Rain. The document was recorded by Conan, the Angel of AIM. It said that a creature with a Venus flytrap around its head and its face split in two, one half white and the other black, had come to AIM, hiding in the shadows of Madara Uchiha. Conan wrote that Zetsu did the thinking for Madara. Itachi asked the woman. What did he want? He said, he could give me my sight, restore my legacy, and unite me with my family. In exchange for what? Itachi questioned. For signing a summoning contract. Koi fish, I think. Sasuke's jaw hardened and his face dipped in reflective silence. Zetsu had been unaccounted for since Kagaya came out of the moon. Some Hyuga now living in Blue Tree reported to have spotted a creature bearing similar features to that Conan wrote of falling down the false god tree that was raised down by Blue's Amaterasu flames, but Kushina and the other ninjas sent to investigate didn't find anyone or anything there. Not even a human-shaped pile of ashes. Blue Tree searched for Zetsu. That was a gross understatement. Zetsu had a big part to play in releasing the goddess from her prison. Up till when she was blasted off into space by Yugao Yuzuki, Conan recorded every single event discovered by herself in connection to Zetsu. The origami angel didn't trust Zetsu. Another gross understatement. When Nagato sent her off to Zayuki, tasked to be Yugao's warden and capture Blue once he surfaced, she noticed Zetsu's panic and his sudden fascination with Minato Namikaze. It wasn't a coincidence that the Yandame's death, which was done in the secrecy of the Otsutsuki dimension, was somehow leaked to the elemental nations. Zetsu did that. The invading Otsutsuki spoke nothing of it, carrying this secret with them as they fled once the earth was polluted by corrosive Ten-Tails chakra. There hadn't been a sighting of those from Kagaya's clan ever since, and Zetsu too for that matter. Or Mikoto could be lying, deceiving them into being with her for longer. Sasuke leaned to his older brother and whispered, What do you think? Itachi frowned. We can't just brush this off. If this is true, then he could want Mom's DNA connection with Uncle to somehow manipulate the God Tree. Sasuke sharply deduced. Zetsu could want to try again to free Kaguya. Konan guessed that Zetsu's curiosity on Minato had something to do with how the Blue Uchiha died on that day in Wave Country. She didn't know how or why. When she attended a meeting with Minato present, where the Yondaime felicitated for Nagato's support in luring out Blue, she could distinctively sense another chakra reserve aside from Minato's. It could be from Blue, but that would only mean Minato sealed part of the Blue Uchiha into himself. That made no sense. The chakra she sensed from Minato was too immense to be human. Later, while the clan council were piecing everything together, Yugao confirmed that Minato sealed half of Blue's soul into a level 10-tailed beast containment seal using the hands of the Shinigami. Blue told her so, and she couldn't help but believe him. That was Minato's connection to Blue. A spiritual connection, but a connection all the same. Zetsu found a way to tap into that connection and used it to grow a false god tree to free his mistress. The amount of chakra needed for the jutsu was colossal, and the blue half-soul had just enough. There were still many questions left unanswered. Orochimaru filled in what she could, and yet more questions unfurled before their very eyes. Life and death. Existence and reality. Alternate dimensions. Even godhood. In the end, their findings were made classified under the leader's seal as a double S-rank secret, invariably swearing all involved to silence. Mikoto reintroduced herself to the talk. I told him no. I don't want any part in his plans. Sasuke nodded. Good. He turned to Itachi. We'll have to keep an eye on her. Come by more often. Maybe. The Genjutsu master agreed. Yeah. I can send down some of my jounin, sworn to secret at the cost of a painful death, of course. Itachi directed a hard glare at their mother. If you're lying, then strike me down. Mikoto swore. Send someone to kill me, or hand me a kunai so I can do it myself. She got up with a wince, arranging her shawl. Her left fist closed into a ball and she thumped her right chest thrice, vowing. I swear. I am not lying. Blue tapped his chin. A frown played on the corners of his lips. His left hand moved, hovering over a chess set. His fingers found a pawn, and he inched it forward once. He smirked at the unseen perspiration breaking on Kaguya's brow, eyeing the pieces he had claimed from her. It was an even fight. There were casualties on both sides. If he didn't know any better, he'd have thought she was a genius. Blue wasn't raised to move the pieces. He was a piece, likely a pawn too. She, on the other hand, was brought up in the Otsutsuki clan head's home, raised to take over the clan by virtue of her birthright. For someone that didn't study the extensive layout of every possible wartime maneuver, Blue was holding himself fairly well against the Otsutsuki princess. Question was how, in spite of the games they played that constantly waged evenly, why did he keep winning? Did she let him win? I thought you were trained in war strategies when you were a kid. The man's blue eyes, a mirage he cast over himself alongside this cloudy landscape, glinted at the invisible perspiration that broke over on his opponent's brow. Hello, Naruto. I'm Rusty, nice to meet you. Kaguya harmlessly sneered, sarcasm dripped in her airy tone. It's been 18 years already, Yeah? What's your point? You haven't beaten me once. He placed his hands on his knees, sitting up straight and raising an eyebrow. Why don't we take a break? I'll break you. Really now? He leaned back a little, mildly surprised at her frustrated outburst. I've got you where I want you. She whispered so quietly he might not have heard it. Right where I want you. Her true tone slipped out. Blue narrowed his gaze at her secretive smirk, shyly looking up at him from under her lashes. A wave of chakra pulsed from her, shaking the dreamscape and shifting it from a serene cloudy world to the valley of N before the god tree grew out. Naruto raised a bored eyebrow. Black Setsu, huh? He commented idly, perching his chin in his hand and the elbow on his knee, deciding to move a knight to strike down one of Kaguya's pawns. shifting it back to safety at the back of the ranks. "You forget that you're quite literally in my head, Kaguya." He scoffed when she snatched his queen, who was purposely lingering at the front lines as bait. Literally and figuratively, there wasn't a thing in all the multiverse he didn't know, and there wasn't an errant thought in her head he wasn't aware of. She was a smart, cunning, conniving woman, and there were many ideas in her head placed to mislead him from her true ambitions. She was steadily learning how to obscure her real thoughts. Obscure, not erase from his sights. Right down to the finer, most intricate, most complex details. "I know what you're thinking. I know everything, Kaguya." She exhaled a laughing breath. "Do you, honey? You, on the other hand, can't read my thoughts." He took one of her knights, with a solitary pawn. "Enlighten me on what you're thinking, then. Your black Zetsu isn't the only one awake." Her hand stilled, floating over a rook aimed directly at the bishop guarding Naruto's king. Blue's smile broadened at her hesitation. Black Zetsu took injury from falling down that great height when Blue burnt the false god tree with an Amaterasu, scorched closely by the black flames but not lit on fire. It dug itself and Kaguya's white Zetsu deep into the earth of Blue tree to heal and regrow, creating for itself a direct link back and forth the village without alerting the alarms. Kaguya brought her rook down on Blue's bishop, smashing it to wooden pieces in a show of shortly losing her patience. "So?" He glanced down at the chipped wood that was now his bishop, setting his hands on his knees. "While I don't have access to your Zetsu's mind and I can't read its thoughts, I know exactly what it's going to do." He didn't take her trap, instead moving his king away from the attacking rook. His first prediction already came true, with Zetsu trying to convince his sister to sign Kaguya's koi fish summoning contract, and that route was effectively blocked now that her sons were aware of Zetsu resurfacing. Blue's next prediction would happen not at once but gradually, over the years and again encompassing the whole continent. Zetsu would influence governments, manipulate minds, raise an army. This wouldn't be like Akatsuki, or Obito, or Indra and Azura, or anything like that. This would be different. Zetsu would somehow find Blue's DNA in hidden whirlpool, maybe a dried-up blood stain, lingering chakra on surfaces or a tiny piece of his skin from somewhere on the island. Taking that DNA away was another thing entirely, for he would face opposition from Blue Tree. But Zetsu would find that blue DNA. Zetsu would cultivate a clone of Naruto from that DNA, and it would implant Kekkei Genkai into that unfortunate clone. Little by little, one at a time, Zetsu would give the clone freedom to gain awareness, while still toying with its mental state. Then war would come to Blue Tree and all its allies, which would grow and be many by that time, forcefully dragging the world into a fourth Shinobi war. The Otsutsuki return was uncertain without Kaguya herself directly ordering them, though that wouldn't matter much by that point. The clone was to grasp control of the God Tree and separate Kaguya from it, releasing her from Blue's mental prison. Naruto changed the location they were in. The Valley of End switched to the graveyard in Blue Tree at night time, devoid of visiting mourners and with its gate closed for the night. The two deities played their game of chess beside a grave. Kaguya's Byakugan didn't peer around at the environment switch, focused on the chessboard. Naruto's omnipotent power over existence and reality could base the dream world they were currently in on the real world outside, including real people if he wanted to but not able to directly affect them aside from the healthy aura emanating from the God Tree. In the silent battle he was having with the rabbit goddess, he couldn't spare much of his attention away from her. What he could do was prematurely breathe life into his will. Naruto's will wasn't him and he couldn't speak to it, but it lived to serve its master. Blue raised a finger to his lips and closed his eyes. Listen! There was a tree root pod inside the graveyard. Utter quiet bathed the graveyard, broken by the chirping of crickets and the hooting of owls. Then the pod broke open and something fell out. A white Zetsu. Not one of Kaguya's. This one was Naruto's. Seconds later, dark vines erupted from the earth, gathering together to form another thing. Its head warbled with those vines and its body, humanoid as it was, writhed with plant life. Darkness in the graveyard prevented a better look at the creature. Its cerulean eyes shone on the panting white Zetsu, who hunkered down to its knees, lowering its head to the newcomer. Blue Zetsu, or better named Blue Zetsu. It was made during the chaos of Blue restructuring the planet, where he imbued a single creeper vine on the other side of the world with his will. He was inspired to do so when he realized Kagaya's Zetsu was still alive. The lady had done so, creating Zetsu from her will when her two sons sealed her away into the moon. While the lady's will was the weakened manifestation of the koi fish contract, Blue's will was the less powered version of the crow contract. Blue's will merged with his white Zetsu. It had one job to do, implanted in its head from when Kagaya's Zetsu buried itself in the ground to heal. It would scratch and claw to not let its master down. Kagaya laughed. Naruto beamed. At this new beginning, the first battles would take place in the shadows. It would eventually see light. War was coming to the elemental nations. That much was unavoidable. And that concludes the final part of this story. Thank you for spending your time here at Ichiraku Ramen and listening all the way to the end. Your support helps keep these stories alive and allows the Shinobi world to continue through new adventures and alternate timelines. If you enjoyed killing off the Blue Uchiha, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories. Once again, full credit goes to Foy the Snooze Button, the original writer of this story. If you would like to read the original version, you can find the link to the story in the description below. Let me know in the comments what story you would like to hear next. Until the next time, stay safe, and I'll see you again at Ichiraku Ramen.